Are some people just truly fucked from the very beginning? Or at least from very near the very beginning? For example, could someone suffer so much abuse and or neglect in their first 6 months of life that they just can't ever fully recover and live a normal life, even if they don't have obvious physical disabilities or mental illnesses? While it's sweet to think that we all have a fighting chance in life, that some amount of therapy, love, and security could turn even the most abused and unwell person into a healthy, happy, functioning member of society, is that really true? I've teetered back and forth about this over the years, but generally I think I've leaned towards believing that while the overwhelming majority of us have a lot of say over what kind of person we get to choose to be in this life, there are rare exceptions. Gerald Eugene Stano may have been one of those exceptions. Born Paul Zeiniger on September 12, 1951, in Schenectady, New York, Gerald Stano was his mother's fifth child. She's unnamed in sources, and the third that would be taken from her by social services. She neglected him to such an extent that when baby Paul was finally taken, doctors declared him unfit for adoption, saying he was functioning, quote, at an animalistic level, and habitually ate his own feces as some sort of survival mechanism. He was lucky to still be alive by the time he was taken from his mother's home. A couple named Eugene and Norma Stano eventually adopted Zeiniger and legally changed his name to Gerald Eugene Stano. But they seemingly couldn't overcome his bad beginnings, progressing from lying to stealing to coercing a mentally disabled girl to have sex with them and impregnating her. Gerald Stano graduated to murder by the time he was in his early 20s. In Daytona Beach, where he would make his home as an adult, he killed a woman on an average of every 3 months, but sometimes he separated his victims by only weeks or even days. From 1973 to 1980, at least 23 women died at the hands of this moody, violent man who prowled the streets wearing his distinctive disco-inspired wide lapel shirts and polyester pants and bumping Donna Summer and the like. 23 women confirmed, but Stano would ultimately confess to 41 murders. And the primary detective who worked with Stano to find closure on unsolved murder cases became convinced the true number of his murder victims, closer to 88. In many circumstances, the trigger that sent Stano into a murderous rage was the same. Comments about his manhood, his clothes, or his weight frequently provoked him into a boiling rage, as did sexual rejection or anger over having to pay for sex. And he lashed out and killed the girls as they sat cowering in the passenger seat of his car. Sometimes he lashed out with his fist, more often it was with a knife. As he continued to drive, this madman would slash his victims again and again. Other times he shot them. All of this left authorities baffled. Different jurisdictions and different ways the victims died left investigators in various counties with only a small slice of the full picture. And even if they'd managed to look at all of Gerald's victims holistically, it would still have seemed incredibly unlikely that one man would go for both sex workers and college students. 12-year-old kids he knew, working women in their mid-30s he didn't know. Gerald Stano's murderous appetite knew no bounds. If he came across a girl or woman who he felt was vulnerable, who he thought he could kill, that's often exactly what he did. The disturbing story of killing machine Gerald Stano, a man who would spend much of his final years in a death row cell just a few feet down from another cell that housed Ted Bundy, today on another murderous, serial-killing Florida Man edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday, and welcome to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, the Suck Master. Slick Danny, guy who wants to get high on Molly and then go to a Pentecostal revival where everyone is dancing around and screaming some gibberish and treat it like a rave. And you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. And before anything else, right before this recording, I was cracking myself up, maybe a little too much, pretending to treat a revival like a rave by mashing up the video I played at the end of last week's show, and I played a little bit of it during the show too, of Pastor Ulf Ekman going insane. Mashed it with a techno track called Fading from Aim to Head's official YouTube channel. and I have to play it for you. I don't have to, but I'm going to. How fun is this? All right, we get him going. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then let's get a beat. Get a beat going, too. Oh, yeah! Huh? Yeah! Now we're partying. Now we're partying like it's the apocalypse. Saute! Come on! Come on, Oaf! Yeah, buddy!
Hey, I got a brand new bottle!
Come on. Come on! Why hasn't a professional DJ, who's actually good at this stuff, done a better version of that, a much better version of that? It's so funny to me. I love it. I love it probably more than I should. Okay. After that bit of maybe punishment, how about no announcements? Let's just fucking go. Let's talk about a man that if, in fact, he killed 88 women, as some suspect, it would make him among the most prolific American serial killers in history. Samuel Little, future suck subject for sure, was active during some of the same years as Stano, but longer, between 1970 to 2005. He was convicted of killing 3 women, but later investigations linked 31 other murders to him. And then he claimed before he died that he killed as many as 93 victims. The FBI later confirmed a total of at least 60 murders, very strongly linked to Little. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, confessed to killing 71 women. He was suspected of killing over 90 victims and was convicted of 49. But both Ridgway and Little were active for well over a decade. In Little's case, over 3 decades, 35 years. In Ridgway's case, 16 years. Gerald Stano, meanwhile, was active as far as we know for just 7 years. So if he did kill as many victims as some think he did, he was far more bloodthirsty than even Little and Ridgway. He would at one point claim to have started murdering in the late 60s, but even then, that gives him only 11 or 12 years to rack up a similar body count as very prolific serial killers who were active for twice that long or more. It's crazy he got away with his murders for as long as he did. And you'll see, he really struggled with impulse control. It didn't take much to set him off, and when he got mad, he got murderous. Stano also never seemed to go through that winding up phase that many serial killers do. First, they attack someone but don't kill them, perhaps multiple someones. They slowly take things further and further until they've completed their first murder. Gerald seemingly jumps straight to murder. His MO, to drink and do a lot of drugs, to find a girl on the street, to kill her before not carefully disposing of her body under a few branches or some foliage, seemed to be present from just about the very beginning. And that is, of course, exceptionally terrifying. The idea that someone could be out there who is known from a very young age that they don't want to just merely hurt or attack, they want to kill. Gerald Stano made his life all about the hunt. There was no double life. Not really. No respectable family man by day, killer by night scenario. There was minimal compartmentalization. Mostly just a lot of carnage. As for the question, what made me kill and kill again, I can't really answer that except like this. I would be drinking and lonely and thinking about all the couples having fun together, and here I am, single, having no fun at all. Then I would go out riding around and I would find a girl walking, and hopefully she would get into my car, but she would end up making some kind of remark about my weight, music, or looks. That would turn me into a different person altogether. I really don't like to talk about that person because it gets me very upset. These were Gerald Eugene Stano's words, written in one of his many letters when Stano was waiting to be executed by the state of Florida, that he sent to reporter and author Kathy Kelly, co-author of the 2011 book on Gerald, I Would Find a Girl Walking, a book we relied on heavily for a lot of today's details. They sound like they could be the words of most serial killers, save for the killers who were deemed, really handsome, like Ted Bundy, people who use their charm and social standing to make their victims feel safe. How many people have we covered that have done some version of this? They go out hunting, looking for people, generally girls and young women, who are alone, isolated, having car trouble, or maybe out street walking as sex workers, out hitchhiking. They convince them to get inside their car, and they convince them, and then they introduce them, to their real self, the monster. What's curiously absent about Stano's description of his mindset before he kills, though, is that he doesn't give himself any motive specifically. With most serial killers, especially men who target young women, there's a very clear, strong motive that comes across within the violent act. Typically, that sex and violence got connected at some point in their brains and they can't achieve sexual satisfaction without killing. For some, like, what is big deal? Right? Russian serial killer Andrei Chikatilo. It's so extreme that they have a hell of a time achieving an orgasm while with a sexual partner unless there is violence and terror. But with Gerald Stano, that doesn't seem to be the case. The murders he committed, they didn't seem to be sexually motivated, not directly. He was a monster, but he wasn't, it seems, a rapist. He would never give investigators clear answers about whether or not he had sex with his victims, either before or after they were dead, or if he did give those answers, they were never reported. He also wasn't ever charged with rape. Given the lack of emphasis on sex in Gerald's crimes, some investigators have turned to alternate explanations for why he did what he did, that he wasn't motivated by sex, but rather by family. Stano was born to a woman, unnamed in sources, as I mentioned, who had had multiple children who were taken by social services, and Gerald would be no different. By the time he was removed from the situation, he was borderline unrecognizable as a human infant, literally eating his own shit, among other things, always sick, wasn't developing and hitting milestones like a normal baby should, even though he had no physical disabilities or cognitive impairments. He was ultimately adopted by Norma and Eugene Stano, a couple who convinced social services to let them adopt Gerald despite his myriad of issues. And they never seemed to get him the help he clearly needed. Possibly they abused him further. He would say, "My childhood was the usual. If I wanted to buy something, I had to have a good reason. If I wanted to talk to my father, I would cringe at the sight of him. I was afraid of him, and to this day I am still afraid of him. My mother would take charge of us," Gerald and his adopted brother Arthur, "during the week and tell him, Dad, what we did wrong on the phone. When he got home, he would march us both into the bathroom and beat us with a leather razor strap. When I cracked up the family car, he came after me with a straight edge razor opened up. When I had accidents with my cars, he would always go into a rage and say, 'Why couldn't you have been killed?'" Well, this unfortunately wasn't actually all that abnormal for a 1950s household. To have an angry dad who disciplined you with a leather strap or belt, something similar, who sometimes said really messed up shit about how they wished you would have been killed in a car accident or something. The straight razor part, way over the top, even for the time period. But angry dad, quick to dole out corporal punishment, not emotionally available, emotionally cruel. Back in the 50s, that was kind of the norm, I think. The norm for most of human history, actually, probably sadly. For Stano, whose relationship to family was already so fraught due to his beginning, he may have been more sensitive than most to additional trauma, if this backstory is even true, of course. As is the case with many, if not most, other serial killers, hard to take a lot of what Stano said at face value. If it wasn't true, and I do lean towards thinking that he was full of shit about his parents, it seems that Stano's parents were ultimately really good to him. They were supportive of him, seemed to punish him when he did something wrong, tried to put him in different situations to help him thrive, like having him go live with Norma's parents in Florida. But they also never got him the psychological help he needed, if there was even a level of help that could have changed him. However, not getting kids psychological help back then was also pretty damn normal. It wasn't something that probably even crossed a lot of parents' minds, especially working class parents, not living in some progressive college town or coastal city. Then, as an adult, Jerry would definitely not be able to figure out how to build out his own healthy family. He was briefly married to a hairdresser named Teresa Esposito. Before she and her family figured out how fucking nuts he was, Gerald Stano just couldn't seem to build strong, normal, healthy relations with family members. And some think that's one of the things that strongly motivated his killings. With each murder, Gerald Stano severed a sacred bond. He tore children away from their mothers, their siblings, their spouses. In 2 cases, the young women had twin brothers, Ramona and Ray Neal, and Barbara and Bert Bauer. Their connection and relationship began in the womb. Could it be possible that Stano took particular delight in tearing these families apart? Okay, enough teasing. Enough just poking the tip in. Let's fully penetrate the life of this scumbag. See if we can find out what made this monster tick in today's Timesuck timeline.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
On September 12th, 1951, in Schenectady, New York, a baby boy is born. Actually, I'm guessing several babies were probably born there that day. Fortunately, only one that we know of will grow up to become a serial killer. This boy was the 5th baby born to his mother. She'd had 2 stillborns, and her other 2 children had already been taken from her by the New York State Welfare Department. We don't know much about her other than that she was clearly wildly unfit as a parent. Following giving birth to her son and naming him Paul, she went home with him. His last name was Zeiniger, just like hers. We looked up census records and the like for any Zeinigers in Schenectady at the time. Couldn't find anyone who we can say conclusively was Paul's mom, so I don't have a first name. Couldn't find a digital copy of his birth certificate. Once at home, Paul was listless and cranky, often from hunger. Starving and malnourished, he sat in dirty diapers for days on end. He was severely neglected, possibly abused as well. Eventually, like they had with his siblings, the New York State Welfare Department stepped in, sending social workers and declaring that the baby was in a state of, quote, extreme neglect, and taking Paul from his birth mother when he was around 6 months old. And within a month of taking him, the authorities had found the baby boy some prospective adoptive parents, Eugene and Norma Stano, a couple in their 30s who would begin by taking in the baby as a foster child. Some sources state that Norma worked as a nurse, that she was actually introduced to Paul when she cared for him during his initial stay in the hospital following being taken from his mother's care. The young couple, according to numerous sources, showered him with love, trying to overcome the neglect and harshness of his early infancy. Because he'd missed out on crucial bonding time with his biological mother, he was not a warm and cuddly child. Indeed, there's increasing evidence from the fields of developmental psychology, neurobiology, animal epigenetic studies, epigenetic studies that neglect parental inconsistency and a lack of love, particularly in early childhood, can lead to long-term mental health problems and even abnormal cognitive development in the brain. Research has found that parental neglect in infancy specifically can lead to reduced growth in the left hemisphere of the brain, which may lead to an increased risk for depression, increased sensitivity in the limbic system, which can lead to anxiety disorders, and reduced growth in the hippocampus that could contribute to learning and memory impairments. These findings have been backed up by cases of extreme neglect and outcomes of children raised in the infamously brutal and well-studied Romanian orphanages. At the end of their first 6 months with him, as required by New York state law at the time at least, the Stanos allowed the child, whom they renamed Gerald Eugene Stano, to be examined by a team comprised of a psychiatric social worker, nurse, physician, psychologist, I guess another psychiatrist. Their job was to chart Gerald's development, to see if he was responding well to his new environment and if they could see him growing up into a thriving child there. Their findings were devastating to the Stanos. Gerald, just barely a year old, was already considered, quote, unadoptable, which is wild to me. And he would, his parents were told that he would have to be returned to the custody of the state. But Norma, his adoptive mother, didn't take the news well. She fought for him. As a trained nurse, she believed fervently in her own ability to nurture Gerald. She told the social worker and one of the psychologists that she knew she could provide him with the home that he needed. The team of professionals hired by the state were eventually persuaded to let Norma and Eugene have Gerald. And the adoption did go through. But despite his parents' efforts, particularly the efforts of his mother, who seemed to try and shower him with affection, young Gerald didn't get much better. He remained aloof and withdrawn, never showing affection, never seeming to crave affection. He didn't speak at all until he was about 2. Before that, he was already an extremely neat little guy, craved order and consistency as a toddler to an unhealthy degree, insisting his toys and more be played with, or kept a very specific way. For example, if Norma moved an end table across the room, Gerald would notice right away and really not like it. He would throw a crazy tantrum, screaming and crying, non-verbally pleading, that the thing be returned to its original position. Then once he could speak properly, he's vocally demanding that things be put back the way they were. He had a terrible combination of being very, very rigid and having an explosive temper. He also continually struggled with his equilibrium. Randomly, he was falling down a lot, slamming into things, frequently sick. What the hell is going on in his brain? Some doctors thought, remember how social workers determined that he was eating his own feces when he was still in his mother's care, that some of the feces he ate ended up in his sinus cavity. And from there, I guess it could get into his brain? I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, shit for brains. Well, the origin of that phrase turns out to be medical, which shocked me. It's, I'm not great with Latin. Facies cerebro. Very rare condition where fecal matter ends up in your brain, leading to swelling, fever, infection, and a lot of cognitive damage. Having shit for brains. It's no joke. It's a real thing. Well, it's not a real thing. I just made it up. But it sounds like it could be a thing, right? It feels almost believable. No, back to reality now. He was kind of a shit for brains. By the time Jerry, I'll call him Jerry. By the time Jerry entered primary school, He'd suffered several head injuries as a result of general clumsiness. And I know I'm being hard on him now just because I know who he becomes. But at this point, he's an innocent little shit for brains. But yeah, he had several head injuries as a result of his general clumsiness, several 105-degree fevers, also frequently wet the bed, which he would continue to do until the age of 9. He was angry. He would take his anger out on his classmates. As early as kindergarten and first grade, Gerald earned the reputation of being a bully, shoving smaller children around, taunting them, biting them. School was a constant struggle. The best he could seem to manage with most subjects were C's and D's. Only subject he really liked and excelled in was music. He loved music. Didn't say what he played, though. But, just listened to records and the radio for hours on end if he could. Meanwhile, at home, he was frequently caught lying and stealing. The Stano's other adopted son, Arthur, was claiming that Jerry had stolen his toys or stolen his money for ice cream or a movie. And as he got older, Jerry's fucking Jerry behavior got worse. Years later, he would recall under hypnosis how he would murder a neighbor's chickens. A 6th or 7th grader at the time, he said he would pick up a fluffy little chick, then twist its neck sharply, like twisting his little head off, watching and listening with glee as its tiny little chirping noises, got snuffed out. Well, first got more faint and then snuffed out. And I got to say about this, I know some people are going to disagree, but why is that a big deal? I mean, it would be messed up if he's doing that to kittens or puppies. But who cares about baby chickens? Let's be honest. Seems a little absurd to get worked up about chickens, considering the percentage of people who literally eat chickens. And chicken fetuses, eggs. In the U.S., roughly 75% of people eat chicken at least once a week, and 1 in 5 in the U.S. eat eggs every single day. So I'm not trying to sound cold here, but what are we doing? Who gives a fuck about chickens? I mean, if I would have caught one of my kids twisting the heads completely off of baby chickens, I'd only be upset that they didn't wait till the chickens were a bit older. So, they're more edible. I wouldn't care if they did that to adult chickens at all. They could have twisted a grown chicken's head off, then played hacky sack with his head. And as long as we cook up the body, who gives a shit, right? I'm only including this chicken info here since a few sources seem to think it was noteworthy for whatever reason. Jerry may have learned about his adoption around the time he twisted some little chicken heads off. Upon later learning of his adoption, he apparently said, "Did I do something wrong when I was a baby or what?" And that is pretty damn sad. By the time he reached junior high, Gerald's childish pranks of stealing from fellow students and his family began to take on a more serious tone. In Westchester County, New York, he pulled fire alarms on several occasions, enjoying the power he felt when a hurriedly spoken message to the fire department would send trucks out, sirens screaming, people panicking over this bogus call. Another time, from a hidden vantage point atop a highway overpass, he once tossed a large rock down into a car traveling below. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but I guess he smashed the shit out of the windshield. Could have killed somebody. He was quickly caught, and Westchester County juvenile authorities told the Stanos that after the rock throwing and the fire alarms, he got caught for at least one of those, a third brush with the law was going to send him to the state reformatory. So the Stanos now immediately took Gerald out of public school, enrolled him in the Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia, thinking the atmosphere of structure and discipline there could help. But at Hargrave, he just went back to his old ways. They had a chicken coop at the academy. And one day they found young Jerry inside it, laying naked, covered in blood, surrounded by dead, headless chickens, sleeping peacefully on a pillow of sorts composed of nothing but a burlap sack full of chicken heads. He had literally twisted the heads off of every single chicken in the coop. And doing that gave him such peace, he was able to sleep deeply for the first time in years, if not in his whole life. And then instead of just understanding that some kids, they fucking need to kill a bunch of chickens to feel loved, safe, and understood. Everyone overreacted to this situation that to me wasn't a big deal. Fuck those chickens. They were going to eat them anyway. Why are they doing this? So he gets in a lot of trouble over that bullshit. He also borrowed large sums of money from other cadets and refused to pay him back, which led them to doing shit like making fun of his glasses and his weight and taunting him, making little chicken noises, daring him to try and twist off their heads. I could probably stop now with all the chicken bullshit. Any new listeners are probably like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? No, I'm making all that up. Other than the part about him twisting his neighbor's little chick heads off. He did do that. And yeah, that's pretty disturbing. Soon. Okay. Moving past the chicken stuff. Soon, due to his continual behavioral problems, which did relate to chicken at least one time, the Stanos withdrew Jerry from military school, now sent him to live with some relatives down, I was joking a little bit, live with Norma's parents in Ormond Beach, Florida, where Gerald attended junior high. It's not said in sources what life was like with Gerald there, but when The Stanos came to get Gerald a couple months later. Norma's parents had already installed locks on their bedroom door. So that's not good. Trying to keep him out. Now, we've seen that movie before with some other serial killers. The father of Richmond, Virginia's murderous Briley brothers, those terrifying sons of bitches, he put a padlock on his door when the boys were teenagers. Dude was afraid his own sons were going to kill him in his sleep. 1967, the Stanos moved to Ambler, Pennsylvania, possibly to give Jerry another fresh start. Things were not going well with Jerry at home. When they got back from retrieving 15 or 16-year-old Gerald from Florida, their other son, Arthur, who was popular, had good grades, well-adjusted, he got so upset his brother was back, he briefly ran away. His own brother feared or despised Jerry or both. In Pennsylvania, Norma and Eugene enrolled Jerry at Shady Grove School, where his bad behavior continued. He frequently skipped classes, got in trouble often when he was in class, got caught taking his dad's car for some joyrides, got in some wrecks. One day, he took some money from his father's wallet, bribed several members of the track team to finish behind him so he could have a shot at first place. It's pretty funny and pretty weird. Never even crossed my mind to try and do something like that growing up, right? Probably never crossed most people's minds. That's a weird thing to do. I mean, if you're slow, you're slow. Your teammates might finish behind you in a race, but your time is still going to suck. Like, if you run the 100-yard dash in 30 seconds, you're still going to suck no matter how many people you beat. But he did this anyway. And that got the attention of the principal, who reported it back to the Stanos. And while Norma and Eugene were fretting over this strange financial scheme, Gerald may have already been taking the next step in his crime career, a really big, nasty step. Stano may have started killing when he was 17 or 18, around 1969, based on confessions he made and conversations he had while in prison. Several girls had gone missing in Stano's area of residence at the time, but insufficient physical evidence was found when these claims were investigated almost 20 years later, and Stano was never charged. Still, Stano admitted to committing his first murder in New Jersey in 1969. He also confessed to having killed 6 other women in Pennsylvania during the time that he attended the Maxwell Institute of Pennsylvania. Just something to keep in mind as we move forward. Whether he started killing or not, his parents enrolled him in the Maxwell Institute in 1969. Sounds like it was a vocational school, and he studied some early version of computer science. Not sure if he graduated high school before enrolling or if it was in place of high school. He also got a job at the Chestnut Hill Hospital in 1969, and whatever he did there is not made explicitly clear, and whatever it was, he didn't do it for long. He got fired pretty quick for stealing money from the pocketbooks of some female coworkers. Fucking Jerry! Around 1970 now. Around the age of 19, Jerry is living on his own. He gets a new job in the computer department at the University of Pennsylvania, and it doesn't go well because he doesn't know how to do the job at all. He lied about his experience and training to get it. Wasn't long before the truth was discovered, and when they confronted him, he lied again, and he was fired. Always cracks me up when people try and do that. Just, try and get some job. They have no fucking clue how to do it. It's like, how do you think that's going to work out? I mean, I guess it worked out for a previous suck subject, the slave master, John Edward Robinson. He was able to lie his way into numerous jobs and then somehow actually stick around for a while, even if he didn't know what he's doing, but that is the exception to the rule. So now Jerry's unemployed again, also living in some crummy hotel. He's moved out of his parents' place. Then he gets thrown out of that hotel after he got caught stealing from some other guest rooms. This dude was always working some kind of angle. His folks now let him come back rather than be homeless, and he gets another job working for the Burroughs Corporation, a company that made various business equipment, only to be fired again and quickly. Unclear for what, but he was called incorrigible by his manager. That tracks, sounds about right. Perhaps his firing had something to do with the fact that he was now drinking heavily and dabbling in drugs. Sometime around this firing, he also starts dating, grooming a girl named Yvonne, her age not listed, but sources do say she was intellectually disabled. And he ends up getting Yvonne pregnant. Some sources say that he raped her. And then apparently his parents pay for Yvonne to get an abortion. How many times have his parents talked to each other about wishing they would have never adopted him by this point, do you wonder? I mean, at least one of them, right? At least one of them was a little more on the fence than the other. And now they're having some serious regrets. They told us, Norma. They fucking told us. He was unadoptable. I know, Gene. How many times do I have to say I'm sorry? If I knew then what I know now, yeah, I would have tossed a little ass in the dumpster. He probably would have loved it. Could have just sat in there and feasted on his own shit. Maybe found some other kids' diapers to snack on. Years later, the only time Gerald would say anything about Yvonne was when he was describing his general attitude towards women in one of those letters to Kathy Kelly. He wrote, "My relationships with women, I can say, was not exactly the best. It was good up north because you have a different type of girl. Down south, They think you got money to burn on them. Besides, I was very picky at my girlfriends, like Yvonne up in Pennsylvania. If the young lady is a respectful type, no running around, I will take to her and treat her with respect. But if she is a tramp, she won't get any respect from me. Oh, what a tired old tale. Before I say what I was going to say, actually, he talks about like being picky. I was very picky with my girlfriend. Were you? Or did women just not want to have anything to do with you? I'm going to guess it's that part. It's that one. I'm going to guess that you creep women the fuck out and they just didn't want to be your girlfriend. And then you, in your fucking crazy mind, are like, nah, I was really picky. I'm just picky with who I date. Nope. No one wants to date you. Yeah, but this fucking attitude, man, the guy who will grow up to chase woman after woman constantly, the guy who will pay woman after woman to have sex with him, also the guy who dares to call women tramps if they've slept with numerous men. So much easier just to think of women who have slept with other dudes as being tramps than, I guess, to deal with whatever insecurities are leading you to reduce women to their body count or to examine what, patriarchal brainwashing led you to toss around this double standard like it's reasonable to do so. Shortly after he and respectable, intellectually disabled Yvonne are through, Jerry takes the first of many trips back down to Florida before he ends up moving there. One trip he took was in March of 1973. He decided to visit his brother Arthur and Arthur's fiancée. I'm sure they were thrilled, over the moon to have him come down there. Hide the chickens, everybody. Jerry's coming. Shortly after he arrived on March 21st, 1973, the bodies of Janine Marie Ligotino, 19 years old, and Anne Arsenault, 17, are discovered stabbed to death in a vacant lot in Gainesville, Florida. The first two of 23 murders attributed definitively to Jerry, even if he'll only be found guilty in court of 9. Both girls had been hitchhiking. According to Anne's mother, her 17-year-old daughter wanted to travel to Florida after she graduated a year early from John F. Kennedy High School in Silver Springs, Maryland. In February, she had driven down to the Florida Keys with several friends, and after a couple of weeks, they were headed to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Sounds like a blast. Before heading home, she wanted to make one last stop in Florida, and that was where she met Janine, a 19-year-old from Clintondale, New York, who had left her hometown in early January and loved to do oil paintings of the landscape surrounding her parents' apple farm. Anne had decided to stay for a little longer, and the two girls would sell flowers on the streets to earn some spending money to extend their trip. On March 20th, 1973, the two had been in a friend's home with their boyfriends, known as Buddy and Como Joe. Como Joe sounds like a character. They watched TV until about 10:30 when they decided to hitchhike back into town. When it started to rain, they accepted a ride from a man driving a blue Dodge Duster. Driving this vehicle, of course, was 21-year-old Gerald Stano. Sources say that something in the ensuing conversation in the car convinced Jerry that the two girls were lesbians, and that didn't sit right with him. So Stano lashed out, killing them both. Wonder if his test of whether or not women were lesbians was to ask them something real classy, like, hey, you mind sucking my dick for a little bit? Just till I come? And then if they're like, excuse me? Or, oh, gross. Or, no, go fuck yourself, pig. He was like, oh, got it. Didn't realize you were a lesbo. That feels accurate. 6 months later, Jerry decided to take another vacation in Florida in September of 1973 to stay with a friend, Sammy Henderson, a 19-year-old who lived at Henderson's Imperial Beach Motel on South Atlantic Avenue in Daytona Beach. Sammy's parents, June and Chuck Henderson, owned the hotel, and their son had gotten to know Gerald when they attended Seabreeze Junior High together years earlier. And before moving forward, let's meet another teenager, Barbara Bauer. And Sammy will show up later in this suck, by the way. Barbara, though. 1973, Barbara was 17, living in her 2-story family home on Flagler Avenue in New Smyrna Beach, a laid-back, artsy surf town nestled between Daytona Beach and Cape Canaveral. And real quick, why is it pronounced Smyrna? It's spelled S-M-Y-R-N-A, as in Smyrna. Where's the "s" sound come from? Fucking stupid American town names always keep me on my toes. Anyway, Barbara was a cheerleader, popular on the honor roll. She and her twin brother, Bert, were inseparable, except for on the afternoon of September 6, 1973. And I feel so bad for both of them here now. When Barbara headed to Daytona Beach to pick out some fabric to make herself a new cheerleading uniform. The pretty teenager with long sunlight and brown hair drove her Plymouth Duster out of the garage solo. She was dressed casually for a shopping trip in typical Florida beach wear. She got cut-off blue jeans, sandals, t-shirt bearing the logo Ohio State, and then she left and never came home. Her mother, Audrey, became frantic after a few hours had passed, and she phoned all of Barbara's friends in the days before cell phones, calling them on their landlines. They're confirming that Barbara had told them that she was planning to drive to Holly Hill Plaza in Daytona Beach, at Nova Road and Mason Ave, to a fabric shop there. Her mom then called the New Smyrna Beach Police Department and was told to consider the possibility that her daughter had run away. But Audrey Bauer said, not a chance. Gritting her teeth, she waited the required 48 hours to file a missing persons report at the Volusia County Sheriff's Office on September 9th, and then nothing turned up. And Audrey will not know what happened to her daughter until the following April. How much torment is that? Meanwhile, in December of 1973, Eugene and Norma decide that 22-year-old Jerry will accompany Norma to go live in Florida while they care for Norma's sick mother. I'm sure fucking Gene was like, sweet Jesus, I'm getting rid of him. From this point on, Jerry will be a Floridian, which of course is terrible news for many young women living in Florida. On January 19th, 1974, shortly after Jer Bear returned to the Sunshine State, the dead body of a young woman is discovered, partially covered by palm fronds in a drainage ditch near Titusville, Florida. She had been stabbed numerous times all over her body. Her name was Kathy Scharf, and she was a 17-year-old with long, straight blonde hair and big blue eyes from Port Orange. She had gone to the Anchor Bar to party and dance, as many kids around her age did, and then she simply disappeared. A couple months later, on April 10th, 1974, 7 months after Barbara Bauer disappeared, there was a break in that case. At 12:28 p.m., Jimmy Green, jailer and dispatcher on duty at the Bradford County Jail, received a call from Lily Browning, 59, who lived just east of South Road 100 near the town of Stark. Mrs. Browning stated that her husband, Clifford Browning, had found what appeared to be a human skull near their home in a wooded area. Green then notified Chief Deputy Robert Green, who in turn notified Sheriff Dolph Reddish. You don't come across many Dolphs anymore. My son Kyler's almost 19 now. Probably too late to change his name to Dolph, isn't it? Which is a real bummer. Back to the story I'm supposed to be telling now. 2:21 p.m., Mrs. Browning left her home with the officers, Dolph included, to show them the skull. The skull wasn't the only piece of human remains in the area. Dolph and his minions quickly discovered most of the remains of a full skeleton, scattered about in pieces. 2 leg bones, a skull, finger bones, hip joint, vertebrae, and ribs. All had been buried under the dead branch of a crepe myrtle tree and a scattering of pine needles. There was also a sandal, 3 rings, 1 locket and chain, a gold earring, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. It was clear that these remains had been there for a long time, weeks if not months. Dolph asked the Brownings if they had noticed anything suspicious. Mrs. Browning replied that before the dump nearby was closed, her and her husband would often hear music and yelling near the area where they found the skeleton. It was a popular party spot for teens. Mrs. Browning also recalled that during the season of winter collard green planting, she and her husband had heard what sounded like screaming one night between 6 and 8 p.m. "Don't hit me no more," the person screamed. Her husband came to the house from the field and also heard someone shout, "Don't do it anymore." Mr. Browning went to get his rifle to go see what was going on, but Mrs. Browning persuaded him to stay out of it. "Come on, Lily. Please call the police in that situation." Soon the skeleton will be identified as the remains of that poor 17-year-old cheerleader Barbara Bauer, based on the shirt and her distinctive jewelry. Authorities contacted her mother, Audrey Bauer, and requested she come to the town of Stark to identify other personal effects he believed belonged to her daughter. At this point, Mrs. Bauer seemed to remain unfazed by the exchange, apparently still stunned in disbelief. After all, her daughter Barbara had only driven across town to a shopping mall in the middle of the afternoon. How did she get so far away? What the hell happened to her? Stark was over 100 miles from New Smyrna Beach. I say it was, still is. When Audrey arrived at the Bradford County Sheriff's Office the following morning, she was shown several items recovered from the crime scene for purposes of identification, and investigators quickly realized that she was not going to believe for a minute that the items could have belonged to her daughter, even though they did. When Deputy Denton showed her the first item, an earring, she simply blinked and replied stoically that she did not think that was Barbara's. Said she didn't recognize the ring either. Then she refused to believe that the locket with B engraved on it was Barbara's, even though it was something that Barbara wore literally every day. Right, this poor mother, she just cannot accept it, afraid the truth will break her. I'm guessing such an awful truth to accept. I can't imagine how it would truly feel to be in her shoes in these moments. Hope I never can understand. Finally, she was shown Barbara's shirt, the shirt she was wearing the day she disappeared, Ohio State. That was when Audrey did break down in tears. Her missing daughter, Barbara, was dead. 5 months later, on September 30th, 1974, Patrolman Harmon Weldon of the Valdosta Police Department in Georgia called the Daytona Beach Police Department in Florida to report finding Barbara Bauer's vehicle abandoned behind the Azalea Motel at Interstate 75 and US 84, I-84. And sometime around now, 23-year-old Jerry begins dating Teresa Esposito, a 22-year-old hairdresser. And somehow, things actually go well for a little while. Teresa must have been one of those respectful type girls, right? A lady who didn't engage in any running around. Her bike, fucking spotless. No dents, no scratches, no mud on the chain. Things will go so well, these two will soon decide to get married, setting a wedding date for June 21st, 1975. Jerry's romantic bliss will not keep him from killing, though. November 24th, 1974, a woman's decomposed body is found lying face down on an embankment about 50 feet behind the Interstate Mall in Altamont, Florida. It was determined she'd been killed in the same spot that her body was dumped. She'd been stabbed twice, possibly sexually assaulted, maybe not. Her underwear had been pulled down. Her shirt had also been pulled up. But there were no clues to her identity, and she would remain known as the Seminole County Jane Doe. In late 1974, 24-year-old Nancy Hurd decided to move to the Sunshine State. She was moving from North Carolina, leaving her husband Tom, a radar technician. They'd only been married 2 years. The two were having a trial separation. Maybe they'd keep the marriage going, maybe they wouldn't. When she figured out that the marriage was not going to last, the perky 24-year-old Nancy took a job as a maid at the Mandarin Motel in Ormond Beach while she set up her plan. She decided to buy a bicycle to get to work, and by plan, I just mean like a new life plan. And she got an actual bicycle. This is not some of my women's bicycle bullshit. But on January 2nd, 1975, she rode to work with her sister and left her bike at home, her real bike, not her body. And on her break from work, she walked down the motel steps and then she disappeared. The next day, January 2nd, Charles Austin Hill IV reported finding the body of a white female to the Volusia County Sheriff's Office. He had been hunting by the dirt extension of Old Dixie Highway north of Bulow Creek Road near Tomoka State Park when he found the body underneath a power line. The deputies described the young woman as having light brown to blondish hair and wearing glasses, a blue denim jacket with red lining, a light blue long-sleeve sweater, bra, blue denim pants, light blue underwear, dark blue canvas shoes with red soles, and gray socks. To the southeast of her body was a blue denim bag with red straps, approximately 18 inches away from her head. And there was a book of matches, too, from the Mandarin Motel where she worked. After her body was taken to the Halifax District Hospital for autopsy, reporting Deputy Sergeant Arthur Dees, and Investigator Cook proceeded to the Mandarin Motel with Polaroid pictures of the victim, whom the manager of the motel and two fellow maids identified as Nancy Hurd. 4 months later, another young woman's dead body turns up. May 15th, 1975, 18-year-old Diana Valek had no way to get back from the strip club where she worked, Tampa's Sportsman Bar. The 18-year-old had decided to hitchhike. She was found 4 days later in Land O'Lakes, a citrus grove north of State Road 54, half a mile east of Livingston Road. She had been shot to death. Strongly assuming that Jerry did not approve of her chosen profession. Or at least that's how he rationalized killing her. That same month, Gerald Stano, fucking Jerry, was still planning his wedding and dealing with some legal trouble not related to the women he had been killing. He had recently been arrested on charges of forging a check from his employer. The 3-month minimum jail sentence would mean he would likely be incarcerated on his wedding day. So on May 21st, 1 month exactly before the day of the planned nuptials, Teresa, his bride-to-be, put pen to paper to plead her fiancé's case. She told Circuit Judge J. Robert Durden that she was, quote, looking forward to the most happy day in a girl's life, my wedding on June 21st. She added that because Jerry, quote, had involved himself in a most unfortunate situation, the plans for the wedding were in jeopardy. She wrote about the venues that had been reserved, invitations that had been sent, and Teresa had been honored already at several bridal showers. Because of that, she was writing to him, quote, not only in your capacity as a judge, but also to you as a parent, to beg of you to make it possible for Gerald and me to marry as planned. His parents, Norma and Eugene Stano, also tried to persuade the judge to be lenient. They recounted the couple's plans for wedding as well as the future. They wrote, please don't send Gerald to jail. It will really set him back. We just now got him to stop twisting the heads off baby chickens last week. And we're pretty sure he's not going to kill any more ladies around here. Not as long as our good girl keeps letting him race her bike, and take it off ramps and get rough with it down in the ditch. If you show him mercy, he won't get worse. If not, well, that girl's as good as dead because she can never leave him. We already paid the fucking caterer. No, here's what they really wrote. We realize that justice must be served and that it will. However, would it not be served as well, if not better, if you can find the compassion in your heart to mitigate the sentence and to contribute to Gerald's rehabilitation by making it possible for Gerald and Teresa to be able to follow through with their wedding plans on June 21st. I can't believe this works, but it does. Judge J. Robert Durden actually gives in to all this. But he shouldn't have. Oh, Bobbert. Gerald will use some of his time out of jail to target another girl, very young girl. Susan Basil, just 12 years old in the summer of 1975. Her mom, a pediatric nurse, had had 2 children a decade before she had Susan, and discovering she was pregnant again was a shock. She was a whoopsie, but a welcome one. She retired to take care of Susan, who became, quote, everybody's baby, in her older brother Mike's words. Susan was getting off the school bus in Port Orange on Tuesday, June 10th, when a man pulled up next to her, offered to take her to the skating rink. Susan, dressed in jeans, a blouse, carrying her backpack, agreed. Because she recognized Gerald. She'd seen him before at the skating rink. She'd seen him there before during, quote, all skate songs, and once, when she had broken her arm, he had helped her to the office where the owner's son-in-law took over. Clearly, he had not forgotten about her, that fucking creep. Instead of taking her to the skating rink, this day, Jerry takes a turn down Nova Road. Susan now demands to be let out. Jerry doesn't like that. Doesn't like being bossed around. This is a rejection. He drives her out into the woods, strangles her, leaves her small body. She was just 5'0", 90 pounds, partially covered with some small tree branches. And her body will never be found. Stano, after his final arrest years later, will lead authorities to the place where he had left her body, but the site had been built over by that point. Her case was baffling to investigators. Susan had vanished a quarter mile away from her home. None of her friends or her friends' parents knew where she was. When she didn't appear home by 5:30, her parents went to the police department to report her missing. The police, of course, floated the theory that she had run away. Taking the search into their own hands now, neighbors of the Basil family started to comb through the woods near the Basil's home. A close friend of the family, the mother of Susan's best friend, Joy Bothwell, learned that another neighborhood resident, a young boy, had seen Susan as she walked towards her house. This witness was taken to the police station and questioned. He told police he'd seen Susan as she walked towards a 1975 dark blue Chevy van parked on the side of the road, and he gave a description of the vehicle and its occupants, but he would be wrong. Investigators assumed that the dark-haired girl was abducted by the occupants of the van, although they conceded that there was no evidence the girl had been forced into the vehicle. Search of the woods didn't turn up any clues, and without much else to go off, the police put out a notice and a $5,000 reward for any information that led to Susan's whereabouts, and her case then went cold. While Susan's parents waited, becoming more inconsolable, I imagine, with each passing day. The Stano Esposito wedding, that goes off on the 21st as planned. Oh, how lovely. It was a strange ceremony. Instead of cutting the wedding cake, Jerry made everyone watch him twist the heads off several baby chickens, which I know are called chicks. It's just creepier and funnier to me to call them baby chickens. Actually, I should have went with chicken babies. I think that's creepier. Can you imagine someone being like, hey, little fuzzy little yellow guys, what are those chicken babies? Might be fun to just refer to the young of any species as babies. Oh, man. Oh, those are the cutest little dog babies I've ever seen. Oh, adorable little dog babies. Oh, check out that little cat baby. Anyway, just 6 days after Schifferbrains gets married. I think we can call him that now. 16-year-old Linda Hamilton, the oldest of 4 children, leaves her home in Millbury, Massachusetts for the Sunshine State. Linda was a troubled girl. She'd been assigned to a juvenile court counselor in Worcester, Massachusetts after she started frequently running away at age 13. Now she was doing it again. She'd packed lightly for her last trip. Her father told investigators that he believed she'd only taken her silver Timex watch with a wide leather band, a sleeping bag, and 2 bathing suits. A few days after leaving home, during the first week of July, she met up with 17-year-old Scott Henney. They became traveling companions, eventually made it to Daytona Beach together. Once they arrived in town, they met up with some of Henney's friends and later shared a dwelling on North Oleander Avenue. Henney and Linda were allowed to share the front part of the house. In Daytona, she soon met 3 other young men, spending some time at a vacation home in Flagler Beach. The registered renter of the property, Edward O'Leary, will tell investigators later that Linda had crashed at the condo at least several times. Shortly before 9 in the morning, July 22nd, 1975, G.C. Bradshaw, a member of the police department in DeKalb County, Georgia, finds Linda's body. She wore pierced earrings and nothing else. Her nude body, heavily tanned from the sun and bearing the outline of a 2-piece bathing suit, lay along New Smyrna Beach, 3/4 of a mile south of Turtle Mound. There were no immediate leads in her murder. Meanwhile, Mario Esposito, Gerald's new father-in-law, had given that fucking lunatic a job at a service station. His service station, obviously, as a way to keep an eye on him while he's on probation. Poor Mario. God, he must have been so not pumped to have this weirdo for a son-in-law. If he didn't hate Gerald already, By the time he gave him a job, he would hate him soon afterwards. One day at work, Gerald's brother-in-law swung at him, according to Gerald, so Mario's son, and then Gerald came at him with the belt. Not sure who won the fight, guessing since Jerry never said that his brother-in-law ended up beating his ass. Then Jerry said he, quote, took his anger out on his wife, Teresa, and on Teresa's dog when he got home. Short time later, he said he took his anger out on Teresa again in front of her aunt and uncle. Not sure exactly what he meant by taking his anger out. I'm assuming physical violence. 5 years later, Gerald will tell the psychiatrist, Dr. F. Carrera, that Teresa had endured almost daily abuse from him. Again, doesn't specify if it's verbal, physical, both, psychological, whatever. But he said it began about 6 months after they got married. He said he criticized Teresa's mom's smart mouth and his wife's laziness, saying that she left laundry in the washer while she watched soap operas with family at the house. Clearly, Mama doesn't like him, I'm sure deservedly, but that had to sting considering Jerry being abandoned by his own mom. Jerry said that as a neat freak, he hated nothing more than sloppy housekeeping. Sounds like he should have got off his lazy ass and cleaned the house himself. And he's also frustrated with their sex life. He says Teresa doesn't want to have sex with him. Basically, that they had sex during a week after they got married, their honeymoon phase, and then kind of sex just stopped. And fights over their sex life would occasionally lead to Jerry storming out of the house, sometimes saying, quote, I'm going downtown to look for a woman. Jesus. Just 13 months after they get married, Teresa's had enough. She files for a dissolution of marriage, and she gets it in July of 1976, and she gets everything she requested, which was most of the wedding gifts. So Jerry, he's on his own again. And now he starts to really fill his time with excessive drinking, about a full case of beer a week, so 24 beers plus 2 more cases on the weekend. So he's putting it back, if we can trust his math here, about 72 beers a week, which works out to just over 10 a day. He'd also begun smoking the devil's lettuce. Oh, God. Amount not specified, but this is the 70s. So it's probably some weak-ass weed compared to today. Still, he's drinking. He's smoking a bunch of weed. He's popping pills. He was taking unspecified downers, so probably barbiturates, a class of prescription central nervous system depressants, not popular since the 1980s, but very popular in the 70s. But before all that, while his marriage is falling apart, he was, of course, continuing to kill. On December 17th, 1975, 21-year-old Emily Branch's strangled body is found floating in Spruce Spring Creek. From what investigators could determine, she had been murdered earlier that month, and there's not much else, sadly, we know about her. Just a few days later, the next body would show up. 24-year-old Susan Bickrest had moved to Florida from Ohio in November of 1975, fleeing her parents' house. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but her last name is just one letter off of Dickrest, which I do feel compelled to acknowledge. Feeling cramped from sharing a room with her grandmother, wanting to find work as a cosmetologist, and just have a healthy amount of normal independence, she left for sunny Daytona Beach, where she could only find work as a waitress when she first got there at a place called PJ's Lounge. But it wasn't the worst. She got 5 evening shifts a week, made enough money to set up a new life for herself, pay all of her bills. But then on December 20th, 1975, at approximately 4:45 p.m., 2 fishermen, Pete Rosen and Larry Gump, found her dead body floating in Spruce Creek, just south of Daytona Beach. The body had long blonde hair, was clad in blue jeans, a maroon jacket, and platform shoes. Deputies recovered it from the river, transported it to the Halifax Hospital morgue for autopsy. Medical examiner Dr. Arthur Schwartz noted that the victim had lacerations to the bridge of her nose, the tip of her nose, and around her nostrils. Also noted a laceration to her lower lip and a minor laceration to the chin. She had been beaten, had a small abrasion beneath her left eye. He concluded that she had been strangled and placed in the water, and she remained in the water for 6 to 8 hours before her body was discovered. Susan might not have been dead when she was put in the water, only unconscious, but then she drowned. Emma Bickrest, her mother, was not told about the manual strangulation initially, just that her daughter had drowned. A day later, she was told the horrible truth that her daughter had been murdered. Less than 2 months later, February 10th, 1976, Bonnie Jean Hughes gets bludgeoned to death. The 34-year-old's dead body will be found the following day in Polk County, approximately 200 yards south of County Road 546, near the intersection of 546 and U.S. Highway 27. Her 1974 brown and gold Cadillac sedan found just 50 feet from her body, and that is all we know about her. We do know a bit more about one of Stano's next victims. Saturday, May 29th, 1976, Cheryl Ramona Neal was having a rough day. The 19-year-old, from Forest Park, Georgia, who went by her middle name of Ramona, had come to Daytona Beach to have a great time, to celebrate her high school graduation with a bunch of friends, with her boyfriend, but the weekend quickly turned sour because on Saturday afternoon, she walked into her boyfriend, William Meadows' room, which I assume was also her room, at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk, and found that 4 girls were partying in bikinis in his room with him. Understandably, she doesn't love that. After she, I imagine, told him to go fuck himself or shared similar sentiments, Ramona stormed out clad in only a blue bikini with white polka dots and a beach blanket. She had $77 on her, enough to drum up some fun. She headed towards the picnic area on Ocean Ave around 3 p.m., then was seen by 2 other people in that area at 6 and 8 p.m., just hanging out with some other people. Someone then saw her in the elevator at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk later that evening, but Ramona didn't show up to meet her friends to do some partying later that night, and the 15 seniors from Forest Park High who traveled there with her were now very worried. An officer was dispatched to the Mayan Inn where Ramona was staying with the 2 other young women in room 601 at 10:30 p.m. 2 days later, Monday, May 31st, a distraught Jack Neal, Ramona's dad, now arrives in Daytona Beach to help look for her. He told the police all about his daughter, including how she had a twin brother, Ray Neal, who was stationed with the U.S. Marines in San Diego currently. The Neal twins were babies number 7 and 8 for their parents, Juanita and Jack. They grew up in a large, loving Christian family. The 9 Neal children crowded into a 3-bedroom home. The dad worked. Mom stayed home, looked after all the kids. Jack told the police that Ramona grew up to be a normal teen who liked to sew, did well in school, and loved her boyfriend. She'd never dated any other boy, and he had never dated any other girl. Sounds like he was about to, though. In other words, though, she was not the type to run away. Next day, Jack returned to the police station, inquiring if there were any further information as to the whereabouts of his daughter, and there wasn't. 4 days later, on Friday, June 4th, a sergeant with the Forest Park Police Department contacted 3 of Ramona Neal's friends. The girls relayed how she had fought with her boyfriend, William, and one girl mentioned that she had seen Ramona arguing with William again that night, so officers wondered, maybe this guy knows more than he'd let on. Now he's a suspect. They interviewed William, who categorically denied having anything to do with his girlfriend's disappearance, and he provided the police with 32 names and telephone numbers of people who could verify his whereabouts that weekend. Now the authorities are left wondering, if it's not William, who the hell is it? What happened to Ramona? Well, the answer to that second question won't come until June 15th. That day, Kenneth Corden, a local student, was traveling along Old Dixie Highway when his motorcycle ran out of gas. He started to push it down the road until he got to a gas station, but then he stopped approximately 0.4 of a mile north on National Gardens Road and Old Dixie Highway. There, Gordon noticed something in a ditch on the west side of the road. He believed it to be a dead animal until he inspected it more closely, found that it appeared to be the dead body of a young woman. He quickly pushed his motorcycle then to the Texaco station on Interstate 95 and US 1 and notified the sheriff's office. And Deputy Sergeant, we've heard of this guy, he's been introduced once before, Arthur Dees, called to the scene. Before I say anything else, I hope that Arthur later married a woman with the last name of Nuts, and that they had kids. Just beautiful kids who took on a hyphenated name of Dees Nuts. Sorry, my inner 12-year-old feels compelled to announce stupid shit sometimes. Deputy Sergeant Arthur Dees, not Nuts, arrives, finds the body of a young white woman lying approximately 10 to 15 feet down the embankment. Someone had haphazardly covered her body with sticks, leaves, and twigs. By 8 p.m. on June 16th, the medical records, as well as dental charts, had arrived from Forest Park. There was no doubt the body was that of Cheryl Ramona Neal. 3 days later, a thorough ground search is conducted in the area where Ramona was found. Members of the Halifax Fire Department assisted in combing the remote area for clues as to who the killer was, and they found one, but only one. Shoveling the area, a slug was recovered. It was encrusted, appeared to be from a .38 or .45 caliber weapon. No more bodies, later attributed to Gerald Stano, will turn up the rest of 1976. Maybe he was too depressed about his marriage falling apart to go looking for more victims. Maybe he took up chicken farming for a while, found a different outlet for his rage. Whatever it was, he wouldn't kill again until the spring of 1977 that we know of. Or he wouldn't kill again in the spring of 1977 that we know of, or that summer. Too busy drinking drinking some beer, you know? No, he's drinking beer, smoking weed, popping downers. If only he would have drank more, smoked more, popped more pills. No one else would have had to die. By the early fall of 1977, he's definitely back at it if he wasn't already. Gail Foster, an 18-year-old exotic dancer, disappears while hitchhiking on September 26th. The second 18-year-old exotic dancer. God dang. Just a kid. And if you're 18, you might be thinking, no, I'm not a kid. I get it. I remember those days. But if you make it to my age, I'm 47 now, you will think 18 is still being a kid. 2 days later, her body found in a grove near Old Pasco Road, west of Interstate 75. Then just a couple weeks later, a motel desk clerk named Emily Grieve, 38, killed while hitchhiking October 10th, 1977. Her body dumped off State Road 54 west of Curly Road. And a month after that, in November of 1977, another young woman goes missing. He is really back at it. Her name was Mary Kathleen went by Katie, so Katie Muldoon, 23-year-old student at Daytona Beach Community College. She's working at a restaurant/bar to pay for woodworking classes she was taking. She loved woodworking, loved it so much she named her golden retriever puppy Cedar. And she was excited to get her degree, get a better job, attain a kind of security she had never had in her youth, in which she was in and out of a series of foster homes after her parents both died. So sad. A school acquaintance gave her a ride to the restaurant she worked at November 11th, 1977. And then, soon after she left work that evening, her lifeless body would be found in a water-filled ditch along US 1 at New Smyrna Beach. She had been beaten, shot in her right temple with a small caliber weapon, and drowned. February 17th, 1980 now, Sergeant Paul Crow, future Daytona Beach Chief of Police, gets a call to come in on his day off. And Sergeant Crow is a fucking badass. He is the guy who will eventually be most responsible for not only getting this clown off of the street, but also getting him to confess to enough shit to end up in the electric chair. So hail Paul Crow. He first joins the case at Stano when the body of a young woman had been found laying off of Bellevue Avenue in a black striped long-sleeved silk shirt and blue jeans on, as I mentioned, February 17th, 1980. She had been stabbed to death. Her killer had deliberately covered her body with branches after placing the corpse on the ground. Among other things, she had been stabbed in the thigh, a detail that will later turn out to be really important. Soon, Crow will discover her name, Mary Carol Mather, age 20. She'd been missing since January 27th. Her mom had dropped her off at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk on North Atlantic Avenue, Daytona Beach's entertainment area, and Mary Carol had tried to convince her to come up and say hi, but Jerry, Mary Carol's mom, had to be up early the next morning and declined. Oh my God, the fucking guilt she must have felt, even though it was not her fault. So Mary Carol went up by herself to the lounge at the top of the hotel, which was a very popular hangout spot. She had no worries about getting home. She was planning to get a ride with a friend when she was ready to go. She was at the bar for a while, talking animatedly, oh my God. Talking excitedly, let's go with that word, to friends. Pretty, blonde, incredibly fit, Mary Carol spent most of her time at the gym and the swimming pool. She'd been a championship swimmer, actually, at Mainland High School and was now attending Daytona Beach Community College. But the friends she had planned to meet, some of them didn't show up, that she was going to stay and drink a little longer with. Some employees of the hotel thought they'd seen her get into the elevator with a Hispanic man, and then she just disappeared. And nobody knew what had happened to her between then and when she was found gently blanketed by some branches. Just one day after Mary Carol was found, a man named Bobby Jackson came into the Daytona Beach Police Department and reported that his 28-year-old girlfriend, Tony Van Haddix, was now missing. He had dropped her off at the 7-Eleven at North Ridgewood Ave at approximately 9 at night, February 15th, hadn't heard from her since, which was extremely odd. They had been together for 6 years, and she had never disappeared like that before. Tony was a sex worker. She would occasionally take Johns to an area of Hazel Street by some railroad tracks, but there was no sign of her there. Bobby was extra worried because Tony had recently broken her arm and it was in a cast. She would have been helpless to fight anyone off who wanted to hurt her. Little over a month later, Tony's still missing. Her body won't be found for almost another month. March 25th, 1980, another victim. Before we find Tony, this dude preyed on so many women. 24-year-old Donna Marie Hensley, strolling along Daytona Beach's Ocean Ave, which ran parallel to the Atlantic Ocean. During the day, the area seemed merely to be an extension of the nearby boardwalk, a place for tourists to wander around, watching the small pleasure boats and sleek yachts passing by. But most tourists fled for the boardwalk at night, enjoying the rides, cotton candy games, and towering Ferris wheel there. And that left Ocean Avenue open for some other stuff. It got a little shadier. Cars began to drive by slowly, men inside them looking for women or drugs or both. There were plenty of homeless people, drawn in by Florida's comparably warmer winters than the East Coast and other areas. And because so many were living life on the knife edge, crime was abundant. Purse snatching, car break-ins mostly. Also a lot of, drug use, drug sales, sex workers. Combating, these crimes was a good-sized task force of undercover cops that would patrol the beaches, but even the cops found themselves outnumbered during spring break. During those few weeks in March, the beaches and avenues would become overloaded with young people drinking, flirting, organizing wet t-shirt contests, blasting music from portable speakers. Keeping the college kids safe was undoubtedly what was on the cops' minds on the night of March 25th. And not someone like Donna Marie Hensley. She was high that night on Disco Biscuits, street name for Quaaludes, a brand of anti-anxiety hypnotic sedatives that really relax you apparently, give you a calm feeling, lower your inhibitions. Not a care in the world when you're on Disco Biscuits. Never taken them. But apparently you just kind of feel this lethargic kind of numb bliss. And the buzz helped dull the pain of Donna's fringe existence. climbing into strangers' cars for money, hoping they didn't see or didn't care about, her face, which had been ravaged by drugs. She'd been working the streets for years, looked a lot older than her age of 24. That night, she spotted a small red car that she'd seen before, a little AMC Gremlin hatchback. Tag on the front said, "No rides except blondes, brunettes, and redheads." "Oh, Jerry, you card, you." The driver rolled down the window, slowed right next to Donna, calling out, "Are you working tonight?" Despite her high, Donna was careful. She knew that undercover cops often dress casually, trying to blend in with faded blue jeans, nondescript shirts. She'd been busted before. But the driver was wearing a brightly patterned polyester shirt and a white belt. Disco clothes. Clothes a cop wouldn't normally be caught dead in. She also remembered that her friend Cheryl had seen a guy fitting this description around the night before, cruising Main Street. She replied that she was not working, just out for a walk. The man smiled, offered her a ride. When she got in, she noticed that everything was clean. No beer cans, no overflowing ashtrays. After chatting for a couple minutes, he asked abruptly, "How much to get laid?" And she replied abruptly, $20. Donna directed him to pull into a motel parking lot. The motel, painted garishly purple and with a flickering neon sign, was where she lived, in room 4. She peeled off her jeans and t-shirt, and the man undressed as well. The sex was quick, and she noticed he was sweating even though the room was chilly. He handed her a $20 bill, and then there was a tense silence as they both got dressed. And then, out of fucking nowhere, he explodes into a rage, screaming, "I hate hookers! They're the scum of the earth!" Then he said a bunch of other cruel shit after that. His shouting became more and more intense as he gets more and more worked up, his breath coming in short gasps. The kid who used to throw tantrums when everything wasn't just so, still at it. Still had a script in mind, apparently, for how everything was supposed to work, right? That evening, Donna must have went off book. She was probably supposed to tell him he was such an amazing lover. She didn't want his money, or something like that. And Jerry's not having it. Methodically, he begins to ransack the tiny hotel room, pulling out dresser drawers, throwing her clothes all around the floor, just dumping everything off of, tables. Donna's getting scared. And then she really gets scared when all of a sudden she watches him put on a pair of gloves. What the fuck is he planning on doing to her? Grunting, he moves towards her, then he lunges forward, shoves her to the floor. He screams, "You're going to get it now." And I guess his voice was strangely high-pitched when he did, "You're going to get it now." I don't know exactly what it was. "You're going to get it now." I wish I could go higher. He then grabbed her can opener, started slashing. My God, with a fucking can opener. She fumbled to get out of his way. He missed with his first few swings. Then he found his mark. After scratching her arms and her breasts, he stabs her 5 or 6 times in the right thigh. Damn. With the later report, saying she had been hurt with a can opener and a knife. In the mayhem of the attack, he may have dropped the can opener, pulled out a knife. He also would attack her with other shit laying on the floor of her unit. After stabbing her several times, he shouted that he was taking his money back. And then he rifles through her purse. He grabs not only his 20, but also takes $30 she had made from a previous job. A piece of shit. Then he walks into the tiny kitchenette, returns with a gallon of muriatic acid, a chemical so strong it ate away oil stains and concrete. Why did Donna have that? Who knows, but she did. And now as he lumbers back, he splashes the liquid around as though he is planning to set her on fire. But he won't get the chance. Fight or flight kicks in, and Donna flies. Screaming, blood running down her legs, she runs out of the unit, makes it to the manager's office, where she tells the clerk on duty, "Call the ambulance and the police." By the time the cops and the ambulance show up, the psycho in her room is gone. Officer Sue Cunningham tries to calm Donna down, accompanying her to the hospital now to take her statement before heading back to the records bureau to file Donna's paperwork. Donna's name is put down as a complainant on an A&B knife report, shortened term for assault and battery with a knife. Her complaint becomes case number 80-3-10349, and it describes how her attacker had used a can opener, a nail file, a knife with a black handle, and scissors to attack her. Damn. Case file would end up on the desk of Detective Jim Gadberry, a serious, deeply religious man who would leave the department a couple years later to become a youth minister, then come back to the department after becoming disenchanted with organized religion. Gadberry knew he had to depend on who he called street people to get info. And soon he finds somebody who knows where the driver of that red car lived. The detective then goes to the apartment complex, and though the manager reports he doesn't know off the top of his head exactly where the guy lives, he knows who he is. Gerald Stano. Fucking Jerry! Armed with Gerald Stano's name, Gadberry uses a crime computer, some rudimentary, compared to now, computer they had at the time, to check the suspect's driver's license, and the cop learns that the red gremlin was indeed registered to him. Stano, it seemed, was a very familiar figure to sex workers in the area, especially those in the area of the beach. The detective then proceeded to interview some of them, who told him unequivocally that Gerald Stano was a fucking weirdo. They had some serious anger issues. For example, he had picked up Sandra Washington, a 20-year-old sex worker, a couple weeks earlier, and after they had sex in his car, he flew into a rage, started hitting her with his fists. She was able to bounce the hell out of his car, and then after she runs a little while, she looks back, and he's aiming a gun at her, but doesn't fire. Another sex worker, a woman named Kim, remembered him as a, quote, nutcase, a wacko, who had boiled with rage after sex and tried to choke her. Gadbury's starting to think this asshole is guilty of a lot more than this assault. That maybe he had something to do with some of the unsolved murders of young women in the area. He also learned as he looked further into Stano that he had a previous arrest record for writing bad checks, which meant they had his picture on file. So he gets the picture, the round-faced man in thick glasses covered in chicken baby blood, JK, matched the description given by the young women who had been unfortunate to cross his path recently. Gadbury now set about putting together a photo lineup, looking to get this guy arrested for numerous assaults. Donna will be the first to identify Stano, and that was enough to get Circuit Judge Michael Hutchinson to charge Gerald Stano with aggravated assault. And isn't that the name of the former NXS singer? I think so, but obviously not him. Stano will be arrested on April 1st, 1980, April Fool's Day. How fitting for that shithead. For that shit for brains. After obtaining the warrant, Gadbury heads across town to the restaurant where Stano worked as a short-order cook. Gadbury eased his unmarked car into the parking lot, spotted the red gremlin, confirmation that Stano was working there that day. Inside, Gadbury passes a huge steaming pressure cooker on his way to the counter, where Stano stands wearing a white apron. And when Jerry sees him, he immediately looks nervous and says, "It's about those chicken babies, isn't it? I mean, does it really matter how you kill them as long as you eat them?" No, he didn't say shit off the rip. Gadbury informed Stano that he had a warrant for his arrest for aggravated assault of Donna Marie Hensley. As Gadbury cuffed him, Stano muttered that he didn't know what the detective was talking about. He said, quote, I didn't even know that broad. He didn't even know that broad. Back at the police station, Sergeant Paul Crow sits in his tiny cubicle of an office with no windows. He had been alerted that morning that there was a possible suspect in the February 17th murder, unsolved murder he was looking into. He's eager to talk to him. Once Stano was settled into the interrogation room, Paul Crow and Gadbury went in and talked to him. "Gerald, I want you to meet Sergeant Crow," Gadbury said. Stano extended his hand, shook Crow's, then moved to a seat behind the small desk. Gadbury and Crow followed suit, sitting in the other two chairs facing Stano behind the desk. "Today's my birthday," Stano blurted out suddenly, prompting Gadbury to look up quickly from the police reports he'd been thumbing through. "What do you mean?" asked Gadbury, because he knew Stano's date of birth on his driver's license was September 12th, 1951. "Today's the day they got me," Stano said next. "I'm not sure what you're saying," Gadbury countered. "Today's the day my adoption was final, so I kind of think it was my birthday," Stano now said. How weird is this? He's just blurting out this stuff out. He really was a whack job. Imagine being arrested. And right before they started interrogating you for just whatever, you just blurt out, "Today's my birthday." I mean, that's weird even if it is your birthday. What do you think the detectives are going to say to that? "Oh, no shit. Wow, how dynamite. Hey, everybody, it's his birthday now. It's today. Yeah, it's his birthday. Stay right where you are, buddy. I'm gonna go grab a cake, some candles, some party hats. Oh, we're going to do right by you, my friend, my birthday buddy. Oh, big boy." Way weirder if it's not your birthday. "Day, my birthday." "No, it's not, bud. We got your birthday right here. Not my literal birthday, but it's what I wished my birthday was, so that's pretty special. It's my wish birthday." "Okay, weirdo. How about you let us direct the conversation going forward, okay?" Sergeant Crow did not mock Jerry for saying his dumb shit. He was better than that. He said, "What an interesting coincidence. My son was adopted as well." And immediately after he says that, Stano seems to really warm up to him. Nice. He sits forward in the chair, staring intently at the sergeant, not like a deranged weirdo at all. And then he asks Crow next, "Hey, did you know your mustache is crooked?" That's literally what he says next. And then he points to a bristly row of white hair on the detective's upper lip and says, "You should get that evened up." Jerry was so fucking weird. Why was he telling the detective investigating him that his mustache is messed up? Probably because his brain didn't work right. Gadbury now led them back to the subject at hand, a girl who had disappeared. He was careful to ask Stano if he knew anything about her, leaving out the fact that she was dead. Crow, too, old pro at interviewing, and he was damn good at it. He'd been among a small group of law enforcement officials invited to a profiling seminar at Quantico a couple years back. There he had learned techniques from profiling pioneers, FBI special agents, John Douglas and Robert Ressler. We've talked about them in several episodes. Stano immediately identified a picture of, and of course this is not the woman he had just stabbed, and tried to kill her in her motel room because she is not missing or dead. But 20-year-old murder victim Mary Carol Mather, who went missing just over 2 months earlier, January 27th, whose body was found 3 weeks later, February 17th. The former championship swimmer at Mainland High School, right? She was attending Daytona Beach Community College. The pretty, fit blonde who spent most of her time at the gym and in the pool. The young woman whose mama dropped her off at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk on North Atlantic Ave to meet friends for drinks. And Jerry says he had picked up Mary Carol once. Crow asked him to elaborate. Does Stano mean he gave her a ride? Yeah, he said, on January 27th, the very day she went missing. They did not tell him that. He said she had been walking on Atlantic Avenue, quote, real late, as though to imply she was part of the seedy underworld. Then he said he took her across Seabreeze Bridge over to Mason Avenue. Then he said they went to the Pantry Pride on Mason, got some 6-pack of beer because she wanted a beer. He made a point to say that. No, not this good boy who always goes peeping the potty, Jerry. No, sir. After that, he said she wanted to get out, so he just let her. And that was that, my friend. He was just a dude who liked to pick up some ladies, buy him some beer, and then be like, enjoy your fermented beverages and stay safe, milady. I must now bid you adieu. Totally. Such a gentleman. Crow now pressed him. Was that really true? Why did she want to get out? Did she have some kind of argument with you? Did Stano maybe want to have sex with her and she didn't want to? Yeah, Stano replied now like a moron. And then he added, she started bitching real bad. Then he confessed he maybe hit her. And maybe kind of hard. They were still in the car, he said, and then he reached under the seat and got out his knife and he, quote, let her have it. Said he stabbed her over and over, both from the front and the back, which he twisted away to try and get out. And he said she mumbled something and then made a gurgling sound. And he's saying all of this, by the way, as if they're going to let him go after hearing it. As if it is a totally normal, legal thing to do. When you get in a disagreement with a woman you've just met, you're allowed to end it by stabbing the fuck out of her. As the detectives appeared to agree with Stano's actions, telling him that Mary Carol, yeah, she could be a real bitch. Stano felt emboldened to tell more. He's loving the attention. He's loving the camaraderie with good adoptive dad, Paul Crow, just 7 years his senior. The older brother, he probably wishes he had. He's chatting like he and Paul they're the best of buds. They're friends to the end. It's just him and his buddy.
My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, my buddy. Wherever I go, he goes. My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, my buddy.
My buddy and me. I picture Jerry inserting he and Paul into that old My Buddy doll commercial. They're just swinging each other around out in the sun. Nothing but smiles and laughs and hugs and high fives. Yeah, she was a bitch. Yeah, women. Am I right? Jerry now describes how he stabbed Mary Carol in the thigh, hooking her with the knife and pulling her back towards him when she attempted to get out, and then stabbing her in the back multiple times. And this was just what Crow was looking for, a specific reference to the thigh injury. It had been a closely guarded secret from the press and everybody else that Mary Carol's femur bone had been stabbed so hard when she was killed, it was actually broken. So this is some serious rage. Now they know for sure that this guy, not some nutjob pretender, some fake confessor, as Jerry's been accused of being by some people. He was nuts, yes, but he was also their guy. And he was not just their guy for assault, but for murder, at least one murder. Crow immediately stops the interview, arranges to take Stano to the area where he had said he had previously dumped Mary Carol's body. At the site, the correct site where her body was found, Stano described how he had posed her, which was also correct. Staring at where he had left the young woman's dead body, he now sheds some tears, and it would be the only time Sergeant Crow will ever see him cry. And Crow will later think he shed those tears not for her, but for himself when he realized, fuck, it's all over for me. I'm never going to walk free again. When they then return to the police station, Stano signed a full confession. And a Volusia County grand jury will indict him for the first time on a first-degree murder charge later that month, but that, of course, not nearly the end of the investigation into him. As Crow is finishing up his paperwork, Detective Larry Lewis now approaches and asks whether Stano had confessed to any other crimes. Crow said he hadn't. What did Detective Lewis have in mind? Well, Lewis said, I have over 10,000 unsolved dead chicken baby cases. The disappearance of Toni Van Hadden. Toni was a 28-year-old woman and sex worker whose boyfriend reported her missing after dropping her off at a 7-Eleven just a little over a month earlier, back on February 28th, the woman with the broken arm in the cast. Crow agreed, took a photo of Toni into the interrogation room, placed it in front of Stano. As soon as he looked at the photo, he practically recoiled. Jerry leaned back, said he'd never met her. Crow immediately could tell he was lying his ass off. He believed that in all likelihood, he had killed her. Stano was not a one-and-done murderer. Now he thinks it's very possible that many other women had met their ends when they met Gerald Stano. Not having any evidence connecting Jerry to Tony at the moment, Crow drops that line in questioning and he leaves to begin combing through records of other murdered women while Stano is put in county jail. Meanwhile, just over 2 weeks after Stano's arrest on April 15th, 1980, a little boy named Brian Wolf is walking on the ground close to his home in Holly Hill, a suburb of Daytona Beach, when he finds a decomposed cranium in a wooded area. The area is covered with pine trees, palmetto bushes. The kid took the skull home in a bag, as kids are wont to do with skulls, and his parents immediately notify the police. And I was joking there, but actually, if I was a little boy out wandering around and found a human skull in the woods, 100% bringing it home. I probably would have convinced myself that the skull was some like a skull of an ancient important warrior, and possessing it would somehow give me magical powers or some shit. Not even kidding. I was a very weird kid. I had what my mom liked to refer to as an overactive imagination. From April 16th through April 22nd, personnel from the sheriff's office, old Dolph maybe, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement now conduct a search of about 9 acres in the area where the boy found the skull, and they recover more bones. Most of them were completely skeletonized, but parts have been protected by clothing, such as a pair of women's underpants that were also recovered from the scene, and these parts were still in the process of decomposition. These were mainly the pelvis, including the sacrum, and the articulated thoracic and lumbar vertebrae with many ribs, ligaments, other soft tissue was present. The examiners identified the victim as a black female, aged 26-ish, about 5'5". Skull showed extensive damage and attack perpetrated with extreme savagery. She had received numerous cuts to her head and face. And soon the victim's identity was revealed as being Tony Van Haddix, right? The woman with the broken arm whose boyfriend was worried about her. And now Sergeant Crow returns to talk to Jerry Bear. Fucking Jerry! In the interrogation room. Stano initially denies killing the young woman while talking to his good buddy, Paul.
My buddy, my buddy, my buddy.
Come on! Let's go play outside!
He goes,
What?
my buddy, my
Paul?
buddy, my buddy,
You thought I killed her? Get out of here, bud! As the hours passed, he begins to break. Finally, he says, "You know what? Okay, all right. I think I do kind of remember her. Okay. I think she was like maybe a sex worker. I don't know." And then as he talked more, he remembers, okay, all right. One time I did invite her. You got me to get in my car. Okay. I just wanted to buy her some beer, then let her go after, sharing some laughs. And then they keep talking. And then he's like, okay, all right. Now that I really think about it, yeah, I did pay her $30 to fuck. And she did agree to do that. And you know what? As I think more about it, we did drive to an isolated area. And we did have sex. And then, gosh dang it, I didn't have any cash on me. And made a point to tell her that. Stano now tells Crow that he never planned to give her the money. Instead, he reached under his seat, grabbed a knife, stabbed her repeatedly before dumping off her body, then proceeding down Wild Rose Avenue. And then this maniac said he thought about stopping by his brother Arthur's house nearby directly following the killing, like maybe when he still had some blood on him and stuff. And later, he will admit to taking Tony to that area specifically because his brother lived nearby. He said he wanted to get back at his brother by, quote, doing it over there. What? There's so much wrong with this dude's brain. How exactly did he think that having sex with and then killing this woman near, like in the vicinity of his brother's home will be getting back at his brother Arthur? Just, oh, gotcha, bro. What? What are you talking about now, Jerry? You don't even know. I got you so good. What? Seriously, what are you talking about, Jerry? Stop being so weird again. Oh, look out there, bro. I dare you. Go out there. Go out there in them woods. Oh, you'll see. You'll find out how I fucking got you. Payback, bitch. Okay, good talk, Jer. You know what? Stay right where you are. I'm going to head inside the house. I'm going to lock the door. You're going to get the fuck off my lawn or I'm going to call the police. You fucking freak. I hate you. Presented with Jerry's confession, a Volusia County grand jury will indict Stano again on another first-degree murder charge for Van Haddix's death in August. Another charge punishable by life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. A little over 2 months later, November 5th, 1980, another body is found, this time near I-95. A nearly complete set of human bones is uncovered. Some of the bones still have skin on them near the areas of the shoulder, back, and legs. Found approximately 10 feet away are a green pair of slip-on clog-type shoes. Later found in the same general vicinity, red shorts with blue trim, possibly jogging-type shorts with a stretch waistband, red T-shirt with an iron-on patch on the front, featuring a picture of a matador, a bull, and the inscription, "Do it in the dirt." On the bottom left-hand corner of the T-shirt are the words, "Rat's Hole, copyright 1974." The medical office estimates the body to have been that of a white female, approximately 5 feet 7, 25 to 30 years of age, though later analysis by the University of Florida Anthropology Lab will say that she was no older than 19. So who was she? Some investigators think she was Sheila DeKittler, a hitchhiker who had been seen having sustained a bad beating, but she turned out to have survived. Others thought it was Lori M. McCoon, but she turned out to be alive and well in California, so bit of good news there. 2 missing women, presumed dead, actually found later to be alive. Just this past year, March of 2024, the remains were finally identified as belonging to a 25-year-old Indiana native named Pamela K. Whitman. Jumping ahead 4 months now, March 6, 1981, Gerald Stano will finally spill the beans about more murders, confessing to a whopping 4: Nancy Hurd, Linda Hamilton, Ramona Neal, and Pamela K. Whitman, though they didn't know that was her name yet, of course. First one he confessed to was Nancy Hurd, the 24-year-old woman from North Carolina who'd gotten a job as a maid at the Mandarin Motel in Ormond Beach. The woman whose sister had dropped her off at work, and then she tried walking home after her shift because she didn't have her bicycle, which she normally rode. In his written statement, Jerry would write, "I remember taking a girl up there with me, Bulow Creek, with a blue purse trimmed in brown and light-colored clothes. During our travel, we got into an argument, and I hit her in the head with the back of my hand. She said she wanted to go back to the beach, and I said, 'Shut up, bitch,' and I hit her again. We then stopped along some little path, and I began to move towards her, and she was nervous. Then I put my hands up to her, and I strangled her." Just fucking cold. Armed with Stano's written statement, penned by such a cold-blooded fucking dude who just casually could write about choking a woman to death with zero emotion, Sergeant Paul Crow interviewed Gerald again at the Daytona Beach Police Department, March 12, 1981. During this conversation with his new BFF, Jerry described how he had run into Nancy outside of the Mandarin Motel. Somehow he convinced her to go with him or forced her, and Stano brought her to an area near Old Dixie Highway, an area of or near Old Dixie Highway called, Cobb's Corner. Said he choked Nancy to death because she reminded him of his future wife. Reminded him, I guess, of his, not future wife, why did I say that? Of his wife, previous wife. Quote, bitching, bitching, bitching. And that was all he had to say about her. Crow then steered the conversation towards other murders, like that of Linda Hamilton. And yes, it is that Linda Hamilton, the actress who played Sarah Connor in The Terminator. Jerry killed any hope for a future rebellion against Skynet. No, of course not that Linda Hamilton. This poor Linda, the 16-year-old who ran away from home in Massachusetts, made it to Florida shortly after Jerry got married in the summer of 1975. Once again, Stano confesses, saying he had picked her up after they smoked a little bit of weed together, and then she got upset with him when he tried to make a romantic move on her, so he strangles her. Then he drags her naked to the beach where he buried her 2 feet down in the sand. Again, relays all this with no emotion. No emotion other than contempt and anger towards his victim, right? Another bitch who got what was coming to her in his mind. Now, Crow asked Jerry about the human remains on the white female who had been found on I-95 in November of 1980. The unknown woman wearing the "Do It in the Dirt" t-shirt. The woman just finally identified this year as being 25-year-old Indiana native Pamela K. Whitman. Stano tells Crow that he thinks he remembers her. He said that about 2 years prior, he'd picked up a white female on Main Street in Daytona Beach during the annual Bike Week invasion that occurred each March, when both permanent and both permanent and temporary vendors. Another word I'm just like, my brain's like, nope. Itinerant, I think. But anyway, temporary vendors line the beachside street selling souvenirs to the thousands of black-jacketed bikers who descend upon the city. Crow then asked him if he remembered where he had picked her up. Stano referred to a bar on Main Street called Blackbeard's. The year was 1978 or 1979, he added, and it was past 9 o'clock at night when he ran into her and invited her into his car. According to him, she got into the car willingly. Despite it happening years ago, Stano remembered everything, including the logo on her shirt that said, "Do It in the Dirt." Very specific thing to remember, of course. Stano claimed that they talked about her having sex with him for money, and that insulted that she would only have sex with him if he paid her. He choked her to death. Even though this was a confession, Paul Crow still worried they wouldn't get a conviction for this murder due to the body's decomposition and lack of fingerprints and other hard evidence at this crime scene, and also Stano couldn't remember her name, or at least claim not to. Crow then moved on to yet another murder, that of Ramona Neal, the 19-year-old girl from Forest Park, Georgia, who had come to Daytona Beach to celebrate her high school graduation with a bunch of friends, called her boyfriend, inviting other girls into their room. Once again, Stano eager to talk to his best bud. Come on, Paul, let's talk again. You want to have some soda? Maybe a Capri Sun? Oh, come on, let's have grilled cheese sandwiches and talk about murders. Stano told Crow that he had picked up Ramona on the beach side in Daytona Beach. Can you tell on what location you found her and what she was wearing on the night in question? Now asked the sergeant. The young lady was wearing a blue two-piece bikini. She was picked up in front of the Holiday Inn Boardwalk, Daytona Beach, where there's a little picnic grove with a canopy. Stano said that he asked the girl if she wanted to get a little high, smoke a little weed, and she said, fine, sure. And she hopped in the car. I was also drinking at the time. I had some beers in the car at the time, so we were doing a little bit of both, he said. And then he said that they went for a ride. Stano said they cruised the beach, smoking pot, drinking a little bit. Then they went to Beach Street. From there, he says they drove up to Bulow Ruins in a secluded and idyllic state park. All the while smoking and drinking, according to Stano, and they parked there. What happened after you stopped? Crow asked. Well, I believe I asked the young lady if she wanted to have sex. I say believe because we were both pretty well mellowed out or high at the time, and she started to get a sort of an edgy, pissed off side, and that got me upset and pissed off. And my hand just approached her neck, and I strangled her. That's a fucking weird way to say it. You know how it is, Paul. Come on, buddy. My buddy. You know how it is. Sometimes you get mad, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, shit, my hand's on her neck. And then he says he strangled her. And I also believe that I cut her once or twice with a knife I had with me. Got this piece of shit. He hates women who he thinks are, quote, tramps, women who, quote, run around. But if a woman he has just met will not fuck him immediately in his car, he kills him for being a bitch. Like with so many of these killers, such a sad reflection of the culture they come from, right? Where women are viewed by so many men as either being sexually cold prudes, right? Stuck-up bitches, or as sexually promiscuous tramps or whores, i.e. loose, dirty bitches. Lucifina's smirking, saying, I don't know the half of it about this damned if you do, damned if you don't, put out culture. Crow now said, I know this has been a long time, Gerald, but you said you cut her. Do you mean stabbed her? Jerry answered with a simple yes. Okay, what happened then? Crow asked. I then carried her out of the car and left her up there at Bulow Ruins in a swampy area. Is there anything specific you did with the body when you laid it down? Think hard, Gerald. It's been, I know, since 1976, but what did you do with the body once you laid her out by the swampy area? Describe the scene to me if you can. Crow wanted to know about the method of concealment of the body that would help definitively tie Stano to this case. And Jerry said, we got out there, and as I said before, I got her out of the car and put thickets or weeds, whatever you want to call them, over the girl's body to conceal her from sight from anyone who might happen to pass by. It was becoming clear that this was one of Stano's trademarks, right? Loosely covering, moving the bodies like this, and something that could lead investigators to still other bodies. But it might take months or years to track down all the cases. And first, Crow and his law enforcement associates wanted to make sure that Stano would be kept behind bars for a long, long time, as in permanently. Prosecutors had the confessions, but they didn't want to risk a long court battle. And they agreed that if Stano pled guilty to the murders of Mary Carol Mayer, Tony Van Haddix, and Nancy Hurd, and that his confessions in other cases would simply be read into the court record, and he would receive 3 consecutive life sentences, each carrying a mandatory minimum of 20 years behind bars, but no death penalty. Stano agrees. On September 2nd, 1981, Judge S. James Foxman accepts the plea bargain and imposes the 3 life sentences on the now 29-year-old Jerry, actually just 10 days away from his 30th birthday. Mr. Stano, said Judge Foxman, the information before me, these 3 cases, lead me to believe that the death penalty may very well have been appropriate in any of these 3 cases, perhaps all of them. I reluctantly agree not to sentence you to death to eliminate the possibility of the death penalty. And with that, Gerald is taken to the county jail and later that week transported to the Florida State Prison. But Jerry's court day is far from over. December 18th, 1981, Brevard County Sheriff's detectives now charged Stano with murdering his 7th woman, Kathy Scharf, the 17-year-old from Port Orange. And I know he had just received 3 sentences there, but part of his plea deal was that the other 3 confessions he already gave, we're not going to get in trouble for him. But now there's a 7th. This is the girl who disappeared December of 1973, whose remains hunters found in the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge 13 months later. You might think that this new charge will be distressing to Gerald because every charge of first-degree murder brought with it the possibility of a death sentence, but weirdly enough, doesn't appear nervous in the slightest. Like so many dirtbags, Gerald seemed to truly enjoy bragging about his crimes, reveling in the publicity he got while in county jail. A new charge also meant more time hanging out with buddy old pal, Paul Crow. Come on, Paul. Let's go talk out in the sun. Let's have a picnic. I can talk about murder. You can just kind of stroke my hair and talk about how handsome I am. Over the past 3 months in prison, Jerry had gotten lonely. The press, for the most part, had moved on to stories about other killers now, and I guess he was feeling forgotten. Poor little guy. This lack of attention agitated Jerry so much, he was the one to contact Crow wanting to discuss more murders. I can talk more about more stuff, even if it meant he could wind up paying for one of those murders with his life. Crow was elated when he got a letter from Jerry, which suggested he was willing to talk. He contacted the prison, received permission to have Stano temporarily returned to the county jail, and the band is back together. Oh, fuck yeah. Just gazing into each other's eyes, sharing some coffee. Crow would now get help with some new interviews. He called in detectives, investigators from other departments, like Johnny Manis, the sergeant who had overseen Kathy Scharf's case, who arrives in Daytona Beach on August 11th, 1982. Manis had had an important piece of evidence. That summer, an article of clothing had been taken from Stano's prison cell and given to a dog named Harass II, or Harass II, who then sauntered east on a small trail through the underbrush near the Titusville drainage ditch. Harass II kept walking, haltingly panting and sniffing, east on the trail for approximately a half mile to a spot where the body was found approximately 8 years prior on the opposite side of the canal. He attempted to cross the canal but became frustrated by the heavy underbrush on the other side, couldn't advance any further. The posse decided to terminate the track until the north bank of the canal could be cleared, and then they returned in late July. Harass II scented on the clothing of Stano again and immediately wades across the canal to the north side again. Dog then makes it up on the bank, checks the cleared area, and on 3 different occasions returns to a spot on the canal bank where Kathy Scharf's body was found back in 1974. And Stano had been there. And that is fucking crazy. Oh, praise Bojangles. These dogs are amazing. That this dog, able to pick up the scent of someone who had walked through the area 8 years earlier once. Can you imagine what a living hell it would be to have a nose that sensitive? To walk into a room, turn to a friend and be like, hey, you farted in here, didn't you? And they're like, what? No, I didn't. I mean, not recently, but like, I don't know, around like 6-7 years ago. You were here. You farted. You had digested some fried chicken, some waffles, some hot sauce, and some maple syrup. Oh my God, I did eat chicken and waffles 8 years ago, or whatever, 6 years ago. Yeah, I did give me a guess. But seriously, how overpowering would the smell of, say, a freshly used porta potty at a music festival be if your nose was that sensitive? Dogs blow my minds. Both of my minds. They blow my mind, singular, with what they can do sometimes. Most sources on the web actually say that dogs can't track a scent for over a year, but Harass II, exceptional nose. Or maybe Jerry really fucking stunk. Anyway, another investigator Crow called in was Dave Hudson of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office, who was investigating the murder of 24-year-old Susan Lynn Bickrest, a murderer Gerald Stano had just confessed to. Stano described how he had gone into PJ's, the restaurant where Susan worked, had a couple drinks because there was a 2-for-1 sale on them. When he left, he said Susan was getting into her white Camaro. Jerry followed her to the Derbyshire apartments where she lived, and there he struck up a conversation with her, he said, claiming she got into the car and on her own volition after this guy follows her there, which was not true, as you're probably assuming. Later, he'll admit that he forced her in at gunpoint. On the road, according to Jerry, she started to get a little on the crabby side. Oh, that's crazy. That she would get, wait a minute, hold on a second, Jer Bear. You're telling me that you follow this woman from the bar to her house like a fucking psychopath creep, force her into your car at gunpoint, and then she gets, quote, a little on the crabby side. Huh. He said he then hit her in the face, then he pulled over on 995 and strangled her to death. He then took her body to a marshy area, put her body on the water's edge. Deputy Don Denton from the Bradford County Sheriff's Office, the next officer invited to Crow to come to Daytona Beach to interview Stano, does so on August 23rd, 1992, about the Barbara Bauer case. Crow had heard Stano mention that he had, quote, once helped a girl driving a Plymouth Duster, which was Barbara Bauer's car. In the interview with Denton, Stano went on with great attention to detail, as usual, to recount his vacation at the Imperial Beach Motel, the place owned by the parents of his friend, Sammy Henderson. This is many years earlier. This would be the first and only time in which agents heard Stano claim to have had an accomplice. He and Henderson, Stano continued, were driving through Holly Hill on the mainland side of Daytona Beach, looking for some parts for Stano's car, specifically 2 chrome mirrors. Said they ended up at the Holly Hill Plaza where they noticed a young woman standing with the hood of her car up, told him her car wouldn't start. They offered to check it out. Jerry immediately realized that the battery was dead and he gives her a jump. Then Stano proposes, they drive it around a little bit, make sure the battery's fully charged. The girl, Barbara, he said, agreed. With Jerry in the front seat, Barbara in the passenger seat of Barbara's car. He said they proceeded out of the parking lot over Nova Road, making a left on Mason Ave, eastbound towards US 1. Jerry claimed that Sammy and his car then followed. Reaching the intersection of Mason and US 1, he said they made a left turn, proceeded north on US 1, kept driving. When they've been driving for about 30 minutes total, Jerry claimed Barbara said tentatively, don't you think it's been charged up enough? Jerry said he told her, I'm not sure because it looks like your alternator gauge is off. He said they then kept driving amicably and that soon they stopped for some gas, beer, and food. I don't think you have an alternator gauge, by the way. I mean, you have a battery gauge, but alternator, I don't know about that. Now Barbara started to protest. Maybe some cars do. I'm not a gearhead. But he said Barbara started to protest. She said she was nervous, asked when they were going to drive back to where they helped her so she could kind of get on with her fucking life. And that pissed Jerry off. He said he hit her with the back of his right hand, and then she got back in the car. At this point, Jerry reported that his friend Sammy said, follow me. He claimed that it was Sammy's idea now to get her, quote, far enough so she could give them a little sex. That's a quote. So she could give them a little sex, because that's what people say. And he said then they could, quote, send her on her way. This got to be a terrible script writer. Hey, let's go find some chicks and see if they can give us a little sex. Huh, guys? Because we're normal dudes saying normal shit. He told investigators that they kept driving to the National Gardens about an hour to an hour and a half away, that Barbara was crying, shaking as Jerry screamed at her repeatedly to shut up. Then he said they turned onto a road that led to a dump. Coming over to Barbara's car, Jerry claimed that Sammy tied Barbara up with a rope from the trunk of his car, tied her hands and feet while she struggled. Stano said he then choked her until she passed out, that he couldn't remember if he had sex with her before that happened, and that he placed her in the back of Sammy's car. Then they pulled Sammy's car up to the dump site. By this point, Barbara had woken up, was screaming, and Stano strangled her to death in the back seat. Barbara's body was left on the side of the road, and Sammy and Jerry took off, leaving Barbara's car in a motel parking lot in Valdosta, Georgia. Then Stano claimed he hitchhiked back to Florida before getting his own car back and driving all the way to Pennsylvania. And that was where the story ended, or was it? Well, later Stano will take back the Sammy was involved part. But he only took that back after Sammy was arrested. He said, I had stated first that Sammy Henderson was with me during this ordeal. Well, he wasn't at all. It was all fabricated about him. You see, we went to junior high school together here in 1965. We were friends at one time, but his parents would treat me very nasty. They bought him everything he cried for, no matter the cost. That really rubbed me the wrong way from the start. Fuck, this guy's such a psycho. For his part, Paul Crowe would now believe that Jerry did have an accomplice, but that it wasn't Sammy Henderson, but that'll never be proven. Before moving forward, imagine being this poor Sammy guy. Imagine being friends with this fucking weirdo back in junior high. You drift apart. He goes to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, all that. You know, you're probably happy he's fucking gone. Then he shows back up in your life. All right, you hang out for a couple days, grab some drinks. Then you drift apart again. I don't think these two were close after this. You don't hear from the guy, you know. You don't hear of the guy either in years. Then you hear he's been arrested for multiple murders. Like, oh shit, he's a fucking serial killer. That alone would be such a trip. And then a few years after he's arrested for murders, suddenly you get arrested for possibly being an accomplice to one of his murders. A murder you don't know shit about. And then after you're taken into jail and fucking interrogated and probably sweating your balls off and just nervous that you're going to be falsely imprisoned, this dude's like, I was just joshing. I was just messing about. Sorry. I tell stories sometimes. I told a story when I said that Sammy helped me kill that girl. Sorry about that. My bad, Sam. Reminds me of that saying, careful of the company you keep. I think he's probably lying about the possible sexual assault too. That just was not really part of his MO. October 1st, 1982, Stano makes yet another confession. It was the one he had been the least eager to make, but he had let it slip several times that he'd been a regular at a skating rink in Ormond Beach and another one in South Nova Road in Daytona Beach. And now finally he tells Crowe about how he had been on the way to the skating rink on South Nova when young Susan got off at her bus stop and he killed her. Susan Basil, the girl who was just 12. Stano then went on to confess to the murders of 19-year-old Janine Ligotino, 17-year-old Ann Arsenault, whose bodies were discovered in 1973 near Gainesville, Florida, and an unidentified woman found in Altamont Springs, Florida in 1974. And then Stano would just keep confessing to more and more murders. There was 34-year-old Bonnie Hughes, 18-year-old Diana Valek, 21-year-old Emily Branch, 17-year-old Christina Goodson, 23-year-old Phoebe Winston, 18-year-old Joan Foster, 25-year-old Sandra DeBose, and 17-year-old Dorothy Williams. So many young women. The sheer magnitude of his crimes was stunning to the officers. Courts could hardly keep up. March 7th, 1983, Stano will be sentenced to 3 more consecutive life terms after pleading guilty in Bradford County to murdering Bauer Ann C. Arsenault and Janine M. Ligotino. He had managed to escape the death penalty again with another plea bargain, but that is about to change. March 11th, 1983, Jerry enters a plea of guilty to the first-degree murders of both Susan Bickrest, not Dickrest, and Kathleen Mary Katie Muldoon. And 3 months later, on June 13th, the court enters their findings that supported the death penalty here. No plea bargain. The defendant had previously been convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder, that the murder was committed in the course of a kidnapping, that the murder was specifically heinous, atrocious, or cruel, and that it was premeditated. And now finally, the court sentences him to death to 2 death sentences for the 2 murders. Judge S. James Foxman, the guy who wanted to give him the death penalty earlier, now gets to and says, normally we see passion, greed, the need to eliminate a witness. I don't see that here. These murders are completely senseless. And now Gerald Stano will be moved to death row and will be housed just a few cells down from the most infamous of all American serial killers, Ted Bundy. The two will apparently converse about God knows what for years and become at least somewhat friendly. How scary is it to think about those two together? Gotta imagine those two assholes escaping together, just becoming a murderous duo. December 9th, 1983, Jerry's given another death sentence, his 3rd for the murder of Kathy Lee Scharf. His final death sentence, while his Wikipedia page, other sources say he only received 1 death sentence. That seems to be incorrect. January 16th, 1984, a Seminole County judge then sentences Stano to a 7th life term for murdering an unidentified woman whose remains were found in a field near Altamont Springs. Later that year, in November, the Florida Supreme Court will affirm Stano's first 2 death sentences in Volusia County. Then in July of 1985, the Florida Supreme Court affirms the Brevard County conviction and 3rd death sentence. Stano now looks like he's all set to die and die soon. On May 26, 1986, the governor of Florida, Bob Graham, signs Stano's first death warrant for the Brevard conviction, and his execution is scheduled for July 2nd. Stano then files his first motion for post-conviction relief July 1st, 1986, the day before his scheduled execution. And actually the next day, Jerry was said to be part of a double execution. He and Ted Bundy were supposed to be killed back-to-back, a double feature, starting at 6 a.m. Should have just put the two in a room together. Told him that whoever killed the other one would get to walk out free, right? Charge, sell tickets, make it a big fucking spectacle. Sunday. At the Daytona Beach Holiday Inn Convention Center and Auditorium, it is a classic battle of evil versus more evil. 2 pieces of shit who hunted women and girls much smaller than themselves and even didn't engage them in a fair fight now battle one another. The first time either man has fought a man, which wimp will prevail? Don't miss the chance to see a death match. Get your tickets now. We'll sell you the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. That Bundy connection really is a crazy bit of trivia, right? But a Brevard circuit judge granted a stay of execution until 10 a.m. July 2nd, 1986, to allow Stano the opportunity to appeal the ruling. Dude ate was supposed to be a last meal: steak, eggs, pancakes, grapefruit juice, and coffee. But unfortunately, on July 2nd, the Florida Supreme Court grants an indefinite stay to allow Shit for Brains time to present new claims in this case. Bundy will also get a stay of execution, and Florida will not kill anyone on July 2nd. And now with Stano, the government moves on to his other 2 death sentences. Governor Graham now signs Stano's first death warrant for the Volusia County convictions on November 6, 1986. His execution for the Volusia County murders now scheduled for 7 a.m. December 2nd of that year. But then, complicated legal system, Judge Foxman stays Stano's execution indefinitely to hear his appeal on several claims in these cases, including the claim that his lawyer failed to represent him properly and the police coerced his confessions. And Stano now hangs around on death row for another 6 months, waiting on Judge Foxman. On April 13th, 1987, Foxman now refuses to vacate Stano's convictions or sentence after hearing his claims. Like, nope, this is bullshit. Then on April 27th, new Florida governor, another Bob Martinez, signs a new death warrant for the Volusia murders, scheduling him for execution sometime in the week of May 19th. But wouldn't you fucking know it? The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals grants Stano yet another stay of execution on May 18th and allows him to pursue his claims in federal court. So much money, so much time being wasted on a dude who confessed to so many murders, a guy who shared details in so many murders that only the killer would know, a guy caught red-handed trying to murder a sex worker in her motel room. What a joke all this is. So now the government goes back to the Brevard murders. The governor would sign Stano's second death warrant for the Brevard murders June 4th, set an execution date for August 26th, the fourth fucking time a death warrant has been signed for this pile of shit. Want to guess what happens next? Yes, you are correct. Stano tricks, he fucking gets out of it again. He has more tricks up his sleeve. He files a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the U.S. District Court of Florida, August 22nd, 1987, just 4 days before his scheduled execution. And the district court concludes that Stano's claims of ineffective assistance of counsel require an evidentiary hearing, and they grant him yet another fucking temporary stay of execution. On November 17th, 1989, a three-judge panel of the Federal Appellate Court finds Stano's constitutional rights to counsel were violated during his sentencing for the Bickrest and Muldoon murders. But in March of the following year, the 11th Circuit decides to reconsider that November ruling. Then almost a year later, January 11th, 1990 now, they reversed the panel, find Stano's right to counsel had not been violated after all. But the shit still isn't over. Far from it. Let's jump forward now over 7 years. How is this asshole still alive? In March of 1997, after so much legal bullshit maneuvering, so much more time and money wasted, new Florida governor, Lawton Chiles, pretty bummed, his name isn't also Bob, signs Stanos' third death warrant for the Brevard conviction now, and another execution date is set for April 29th, 1997. Will he finally die? No. Now he's saved by something entirely out of the state's control. The electric chair at the Florida State Prison malfunctioned while another prisoner was being executed. At least malfunction is one way to put it. 39-year-old Pedro Medina, sentenced to die for the 1982 slaying of his 52-year-old neighbor, Dorothy James. Medina's last words before being executed on March 25th, 1997 were, "I am still innocent." Then the executioners flipped a switch, and something went terribly wrong. According to court documents, when Pedro Medina was executed on March 25th, 1997, the following events occurred. When the electrical current was activated, within seconds, smoke emanated from under the right side of Medina's headpiece, followed by a 4 to 5 inch yellow-orange flame which lasted 4 to 5 seconds and then disappeared. After the flame went out, more smoke emanated from under the headpiece to the extent that the death chamber was filled with smoke. The smoke continued until the electrical current was shut off in the middle of the third cycle and the smell of burning flesh had filled the room. Court documents would later say that the smell came from the padding within the headpiece catching fire, but the damage was already done. It looked like Florida had burned a dude to death. Under pressure from the public outcry that followed, Governor Lawton Chiles asked for a review of the state's execution procedures. And state officials claimed that Medina suffered no pain when his face caught on fire. Listen, assholes, okay? Calm down. It doesn't actually hurt to be burned alive, okay? Back in the Middle Ages, people got burned left and right, and they liked it. Wasn't a big deal. Stop being so dramatic, you fucking snowflakes. State Attorney General Bob Butterworth, thank God his name is Bob, and what a last name to boot. Oh, Bob Butterworth, what a name. He would say, people who wish to commit murder, they better not do it in the state of Florida, because we may have a problem with our electric chair. That's pretty funny to me. Also, he didn't actually burn alive. It just looked like he did. An autopsy determined that the initial electrical current killed him almost instantaneously. So just his corpse got a little smoky. His meat got a little cooked. On October 20th, 1997, the Florida Supreme Court declared that the problems with the electric chair were fixed. It was actually not cruel or unusual punishment. Everything's good to go. And now Jerry's execution date is reset for the fucking millionth time, March 23rd, 1998. Dude was like a cat when it came to being executed. He just had 9 lives. Finally, though, he ran out of them. On the morning of March 23rd, 1998, Gerald Eugene Stano sat quietly in his cell at Florida State Prison waiting to be taken to the electric chair. As Stano waited, a large crowd gathered outside the prison. Some of those present in the crowd would eventually make their way inside, like Ray Neal, Ramona Neal's twin brother, along with her other brothers, Ronnie and Keith. We got there early, so we sat on the front row, Ray Neal said to reporters later. The three Neal brothers had been approved by the state to witness Stano's death. We all promised our mother before she died that we would not rest until Stano was tried and executed, said Ray. Most of the rest of the family was also on hand, waiting in a nearby room. Some wanted to be there and couldn't, like Emma Bickrest, Susan Bickrest's mother. She was determined to come to Florida, face the man who had taken her daughter's life, but a week before the date of the execution, she was hospitalized and wasn't able to make it. Some had decided for one reason or another not to go. Mike Basil, Susan Basil's older brother of 12 years, decided he would not be a witness. But he did support the execution wholeheartedly. He said, even in the event that he was not my sister's murderer, he deserved the death penalty. You have a rabid dog running down the street, you put him down. And that's what he is to me. Oh my God, could not agree more. I've actually used the rabid dog analogy numerous times. People like Gerald Stano, they are fucking broken in a way that cannot be fixed. Broken in a way that will only lead to more death and destruction if they're ever given the opportunity to cause that death and destruction. In his cell, Stano ordered his last meal, a Delmonico steak, bacon bits, baked potato with sour cream. Really changed it up for this last meal. Some French bread with some butter, tossed salad with some blue cheese dressing. For dessert, he requested a half gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream and 2 liters of Dr. Pepper. His last words were, I am innocent, I am frightened, I was threatened. I was held month after month without any real legal representation. I confessed to crimes I did not commit. How about you shut the fuck up? As the guard strapped him in the chair, Raymond Neal waited anxiously behind the viewing window approximately 3 feet away from the man who had murdered his sister. He would later say, the power slammed into him and he jerked as much as he could and that was it. I saw the life going out of his hands. I felt like a ton of bricks had been lifted off my back. Afterwards, me and my brothers smoked cigars to celebrate. I can't express this feeling. I felt so much better. I'm so glad Florida has the guts to keep the electric chair. At least there was a split second of pain. With lethal injection, you just go to sleep. And with that, Gerald Stano, fucking Jerry, finally dead, that piece of shit, at the age of 46 after spending the last 18 years in prison. Convicted of 9 murders, he had confessed to the murders of 41 women, while Sergeant Paul Crow and others suspected the real number to be around 88, and that will take us out of this timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
Before I share some final thoughts, I have such a special little sponsor for you. Today's fan-damn-tastic episode of Time's Up, whatever the heck this train wreck is called, is brought to you by Jerry's Fried Chicken, babies. Jerry's Fried Chicken, babies, with 17 Florida locations and soon to be expanded to Georgia, West Virginia, and Idaho, brings you the best, most tender, most delicious finger-licking fried chicken, babies, on God's green earth. And you can feel good eating it, because we don't use no caged chicken, babies. No, sir. All our chicken, babies, are free range. We let them run, peck, and chirp their little hearts out before we twist off those little chicken baby heads and toss their bodies in the fryer. Come on now. Don't give me no stink eye. No one's raising a ruckus over veal. No one's getting bent out of shape over eggs. No one, not even some commie vegans, care one look about grown chickens. So why get your panties all bunched up over delectable, delightful little chicken babies? Oh, they taste as cute as they look. Those peeps are so tender, so juicy, so tiny. You can knock down a dozen, not stress the waistband. Best of all, they're fresh. We twist our little chicken baby heads off each morning right in the coop next to the kitchen. Our chicken baby meat's always fresh, never frozen. And on Saturdays, we allow you to bring the whole dang gone family into the coop. Let the kiddies twist off some little chicken baby heads themselves. Hakuna Matata, come on now. So come on down to Jerry's Fried Chicken, babies. Once the twisting's complete, then we eat. Jerry's Fried Chicken, babies. Don't knock it till you twist it. Oh, I like that slide guitar. Yes, I do. Oh, play it, play it, play it. God, what a nice little sponsor. Making me hungry. Can't wait for some Jerry's Fried Chicken, babies. Let's open up a store here in town. Wonder how tender the little nuggets are. Moving along, Gerald Stano. What a fucking freak. Did the extreme neglect, which was terrible, he experienced in the first 6 months of his life leave him permanently unable to form healthy attachments to others for the rest of his life? Did it pave the way for the killings that came so much later? Is that even possible? For him to have been that fucked up, right, from the very beginning? I hope not. Could some good therapy have helped him? I hope so. I'm going to think probably so. Stano eventually claimed to have begun killing in the late 1960s, the age of 18, no warm-up period. Dude just went straight to murder. He admitted to committing his first murder in New Jersey in 1969, confessed to having killed 6 other women in Pennsylvania. But it was his move to Daytona Beach, Florida, that led to his most prolific killing spree, a spree that lasted 7 years, sometimes with only a few months, weeks, even days between kills. At one time, killed 2, same day, supposedly. Bodies of young women would show up usually on the side of the road or in abandoned lots covered gently with leaves and branches. Sometimes the bodies were so degraded, they were little more than bones, leading more than one person to accidentally come across a skull while walking around outside. And what set him off? In a word, rejection. The man who did the most to connect him to so many murders, Paul Crowe, was asked in an interview just a few months ago for the Daytona Beach News Journal. Did Stano ever say why he killed? And Crowe answered, he hated rejection. Man, did he ever. Set off his explosive temper. And he was finally arrested after exploding on sex worker Donna Hensley in the motel room where she lived. After he attacked her, she bolted out of that Daytona Beach motel room, and Stano, deciding he was not going to risk being seen in public apprehending a screaming, bleeding woman, got into his car and drove away. And then he was soon arrested on charges related to his attack on Hensley. But it was another attack he had committed 2 months earlier that would make sure he never walked free again, the abduction and murder of Mary Carol Mayer. Stano would ultimately confess that he had killed her because she was, quote, bitchin'. And shortly after this confession, Sergeant Paul Crowe got him to confess again and again and again to other murders. I noticed a variety of other podcasters and or YouTubers have called him a serial confessor, as if he was lying to get attention by claiming he killed women he actually didn't. I mean, maybe that was true in a few cases, but I don't think it was true in most. I think this guy probably is one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. I think he got away with what he did as long as he did because for most of the time he killed, he was a lone wolf. He didn't have many close relationships. He wasn't married very long. Outside of that lone marriage, doesn't seem like he was in many other serious romantic relationships. I mean, the only other one he mentioned was to an intellectually disabled girl he dated, I think briefly when he was around 19. He was a loner who went to bars alone, who cruised areas popular with sex workers alone. He targeted girls and women who were also out there somewhere alone, at a bar, working the street, hitchhiking, coming home from school, walking home from work. Their ages and occupations ranged tremendously, but the common factor was them being alone when he found them. He also, with the exception of one poor 12-year-old girl, Susan Basil, did not target victims who knew him. And because he wasn't trying to rape these girls and women, it seems, because he killed them fairly quickly without a prolonged period of torture, he didn't risk as many witnesses as a lot of other serial killers. There was less chance someone would hear these women screaming, struggling, or that he would be sexually distracted, not notice someone watching him as he's pulling off his heinous sexual crimes. He killed quickly, then covered up the bodies quickly, left the area pretty fast. Doesn't seem he returned to the places later where he killed to savor his murders like a lot of serial killers do. Not many seem to remember him today, even though he killed around the same time as Ted Bundy, spent years on death row with Bundy, and actually has more confirmed murders attributed to him in most sources than Bundy, 23 to 20. So why isn't he remembered? Maybe because there doesn't seem to be much mystery with him. He wasn't a complex guy. He was pretty simplistic. And also, he wasn't sexually savage like Bundy. He didn't sexually torture, brutally rape his victims, right? Are we so jaded towards murder that murders like the ones Gerald Stano's committed are somehow considered boring? Is that why he's not well known? I hope not, but maybe that is a big part of it. His murder still disturbed me. If someone like this pile of shit, old shit for brains, stops disturbing me, I'll definitely need to be done with murder podcasts. Now let's be done with this murdering shit for brains and head to today's takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Gerald Stano, though his murders would end by 1980, giving him 7 years as a serial killer, or possibly 11 or 12, including earlier murders he committed before he moved to Florida. He was horrifically prolific. He confessed to killing 41 women. Some suspect him to be responsible for the murders of 88 women that range from children to adults, white, black, college students, professionals, students, sex workers. I guess I already said students, but yeah. Number 2, Gerald Stano, while he didn't seem to have the truly horrific overall upbringing most serial killers do, that lasts until they, manage or don't manage to get out of their parents' house, he did have a very bad beginning. Born to a mother who seemed to have no interest in raising kids, Gerald spent the first 6 months or so of his life severely neglected, missing out on important bonding time, developing strange behaviors that would seemingly plague him for the rest of his life. Number 3, Gerald was finally caught after attacking a woman named Donna Hensley with a can opener, knives, even acid. Luckily, Donna got away. It was her ability to identify her attacker that would lead him to being apprehended and then investigated for so many murders. Number 4, the man who spent by far the most time figuring out Gerald Stano and getting him to talk was Sergeant Paul Crow of the Daytona Beach PD. From the get-go, Stano seemed to warm up to Crow, and Crow would get him to confess almost immediately to the murder of Mary Carol Mayer, followed by so many other murders. That ultimately paved the way for Stano to be executed after exhausting so many appeals on March 23, 1998. And number 5, new info. In 1984, there were several serial killers that hit the FBI's radar screen at the same time. John Wayne Gacy, Wayne Williams, the Atlanta child murderer, Ted Bundy, Gerald Stano, someone else who had yet to be identified. They knew him then as the Green River Killer. They had one suspect in mind who turned out to be Gary Ridgway. But it would take them forever to arrest him. After Stano was arrested and subsequently indicted for murder, Paul Crow received an urgent call from the Green River Killer Task Force in Washington State, asking him how he had managed to, quote, get Stano. Paul Crow had some simple advice. Try to find someone who had gotten away. Serial killers don't kill everyone they come across, and maybe someone had an encounter with the Green River Killer who managed to escape, and now they were simply waiting to tell their story and bust the case wide open. Despite this good advice, the task force wouldn't be able to find that person in Gary Ridgway's case, and it would take them another 17 years to capture the Green River Killer.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Gerald Stano, Florida's forgotten monster, has been sucked. Big thank you to the Bad Magic Productions team helping make Timesuck, starting with Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins. Thanks to Logan Keith, helping to publish this episode, designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Thanks to Sophie Evans for her initial research. Thanks also to the All Seeing Eyes, moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everyone over on the Timesuck subreddit and Bad Magic subreddits. And now, time for this week's updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
Our first message this week, one I found highly entertaining, coming from the very funny and very kind meat sack Heather Stewart, who sent in an email to bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com with the simple subject line of episode 431. And Heather wrote, "Hello, Timesuck family. I've been a faithful listener since 2017. Dang, thank you. When I first heard Dan and Timesuck mentioned on the Astonishing Legends podcast. Those guys, Forrest and those guys, so good. Naturally, I hopped over to check it out, and I've been hooked ever since. You've been my loyal companion through boring weekdays, endless house cleaning marathons, and countless long drives. Your podcast has helped me through some of the darkest chapters of my life, like losing my home, and the past of my mother. Oh, I'm so sorry. Beyond entertaining me, which, let's be honest, is already a Herculean feat, you've also educated me and even shifted my perspective on some topics. Thanks to you, I've become more of a free thinker, less likely to argue with strangers on Reddit. Usually. Yesterday, I was listening to Suck 431 on the Melindy Doom cult and nearly choked on my LaCroix when you mentioned William Branham. For years, I've been hoping someone would do a deep dive into this particular brand of religious absurdity, but it seems to have flown under most people's radars. You nailed it, though, capturing the sheer depth of craziness and magical thinking these folks embrace. My aunt has been part of this cult for over 50 years. She got pulled in by her husband when they got married, has been a devout follower ever since. Growing up Pentecostal, I thought I was used to a certain level of holy weirdness. I mean, extreme expressions of devotion. But they have somehow managed to crank it up to 11. The women in this group are seriously oppressed. As you mentioned, they're not allowed to wear makeup, trim their hair, or paint their nails. Pants and shorts, not allowed under any circumstances. Their wardrobe is limited to skirts or dresses that fall well past the knees. If it's part of their uniform for the job, still has to be a skirt. Did you know that scrub versions of skirts exist? They do. Shoulders and upper arms must be covered in cleavage. There better be a modesty panel covering up the fun girls, lest some man get a glimpse of a titty and have a totally normal biological reaction. Jewelry is restricted to a wedding ring and maybe a watch, but only if there's no danger of a sparkle or a hint of personality. The men have a few clothing rules too, but nothing nearly as extreme. No shorts and no long hair. That's about it. Meanwhile, women are expected to be subservient to men at all times. I can imagine the eye gymnastics that Lindsay is doing. And stepping outside traditional gender roles is about as welcome as wearing a pair of bike shorts to their Sunday service. Her granddaughters were even homeschooled because the local public school was, quote, too worldly. For context, even the nearby Christian Academy didn't meet their lofty puritanical standards. Now here's where things get downright surreal. My aunt's house is practically a shrine to Brother Branham, as his followers refer to him. There are pictures of him in every room except the bathroom and kitchen because even cult leaders need boundaries, I guess. There's a studio portrait, some photos of him dressed like a cowboy for some inexplicable reason, and others featuring him with what's supposed to be a halo. There are also photos of an oddly shaped cloud, which some say resembles Jesus, that appeared over Arizona in 1963. According to Branham, he was hunting a few hundred miles from where this cloud appeared, so of course it was a personal sign from God just for him. Oh my God. Family newcomers, upon seeing the various portraits of Branham, have genuinely mistaken him for a long-lost relative because of how many photos of him are prominently displayed. I wish I was making this up, but it's happened more than once. Examples of the photos are attached. No, thank you for attaching them, and it's ridiculous. Her house also has no TV or computer. She listens to the radio once a day, but only to catch funeral announcements. My God. When she plays music, it's strictly church-approved or traditional hymns. She owns cassette tapes and CDs of Branham's old sermons, though I'm not sure how often she revisits them. I've never dared to visit her church, and frankly, I'm too scared to try. As a mid-40s atheist woman with a red-dyed pixie cut, nail polish, and makeup, I figure my odds of being labeled a satanic emissary and burned at the stake are a distinct possibility. From what I've gathered, they don't have a formal pastor. My aunt's church, located in a small Southwest Virginia community, might draw 50 people on a really good day. Since my aunt was raised Pentecostal, her jump to Branhamism wasn't as extreme as it could have been. Still, I wish her beliefs were a little more enlightened. Having a serious conversation with her can be a challenge. She has told me with complete sincerity that PMS and menopause are punishments for Eve's behavior in the Garden of Eden. And if I ever make plans or say, see you later, I'm supposed to tack on a Lord willing to acknowledge that ultimately I'm not the one in charge. I can't help but feel that if she had ventured out of her tiny community and seen more of the world when she was younger, things might have turned out differently. It's not the worst cult to be in, but the deep-seated misogyny and lack of critical thinking definitely make for a diminished quality of life. Thanks for continuing to shine a light on the dangers of magical thinking and blind obedience to so-called authorities. Faith is fine, but not when it's causing unnecessary suffering or hardship. On a lighter note, I've been loving the Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel episodes. You're giving Stephen King a serious run for his money with some of those plots. I can't wait to see what Bad Magic cooks up in 2025. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to all of you. From faithful Cult of the Curious member, Heather. Heather, you're the fucking best. Thanks for such a great message. Also, your email gave me the chills. I was too busy this week to get into a long back and forth with my dad about it, but I'm pretty sure that Branhamism is the kind of Pentecostal derivative faith that he was raised in. I don't know that it was called that, but when you were describing your aunt, you might as well have been describing my Grandma Carol, my dad's mom. She never worked outside of the home, outside of helping at the church or at a church-owned business like a church bookstore. My Grandpa Bill, her pastor husband, who would work at the church that she would help at, I'm sure forbid her from doing anything else. She never wore anything other than long dresses, and I mean never ever. There is not a single photo in existence of her wearing pants because I don't think she ever wore pants. Not at least once she got married to my Grandpa Bill, which I think she did when she was like 18 or something. There's a family story that when they first dated, when he was in the Air Force during the Korean War, she wore some type of swimsuit, modest swimsuit, at least once. Grandpa Bill took a photo of her. It was his favorite picture, I guess. He kept it hidden. He loved it. Decades later, she found it, was furious, ripped it up, threw it away, cried over Grandpa coveting a younger version of his wife. Like he had cheated on her by enjoying a photo of her showing arm and leg skin when she was younger. She never had a TV that played regular cable or even network shows. They didn't have TV for many, many years, not until some kind of satellite TV programming came around where, I don't even remember what it was called, but I remember every single channel in the package was strictly Christian programming. Like you literally couldn't turn it to a channel that wasn't Christian programming, like not even like the Hallmark channel. Too sinful. So you didn't have to ever seen a commercial that was secular? Nothing. She didn't read the newspaper. Didn't listen to any secular music that was forbidden. She would get taken in the spirit and speak in tongues and move around a lot at church, but never dance. Dancing was of the devil. She begged me not to go to college. It was satanic. If she would have lived long enough to see any of my stand-up, she would have honestly wept for my soul. I've been so offended. Listening to an episode of Timesuck might have actually killed her. My Uncle Paul, her youngest son, was dying of AIDS in a San Francisco hospital. Some nurses nearly threw her out of the hospital because she was losing her fucking mind over all the gay people in the hospital. Gay people, including her dying son, who she would yell at on his deathbed, refusing to accept him telling her that he was also gay. I'm with you. Faith is fine, but not when it is causing unnecessary suffering or hardship like it did with my grandma. She caused so much unnecessary suffering and hardship on her family members. I could go on, but she and my grandpa traumatized the shit out of all of their sons with this kind of stuff. All of them went through a lot of unnecessary struggle. They were not raised to function properly in the secular world at all. So unnecessary. My dad will carry rage over his upbringing until the day he dies. He's 70 years old now, still gets choked up thinking about his childhood. Trying to talk about how fucked up all the fire and brimstone shit was for him, how he had recurring nightmares for years as a kid of burning alive in hell, how he stopped going to church because he felt that, once he was an adult, because he was just convinced he was going to burn no matter what he did, how he never saved any money, never went to college, never really prepared for the future as a young man because he had been raised to think the world was going to end by 1984 at the latest, how guilty he felt about sex, how guilty he felt about divorce, on and on and on. So much guilt, so much shame. So much self-loathing. Ugh, wild shit. Glad the episode was perhaps cathartic for you. Now, another survivor of Branhamite craziness, Bill Selby, a sweet sucker who also has a fascinating message related to last week's episode, sent it in with the subject line of more info about Melindy and William Branham. Greetings and salutations, Suckmaster. I had never heard of Melindy, but I'm well aware of William Branham. And Melindy isn't the only faith-healing cult that emerged from parroting off of his teachings. There's a lesser-known cult called Faith Assembly, which was led by Hobart Freeman, who basically parroted Branham and others. He taught faith healing, was convinced that their, quote, church were the only people who were going to go to heaven. His word was straight from God to him, and only him. And he was, of course, God's prophet. Even Looney Tune Kenny Copeland said that Freeman was too extreme. Faith Assembly had many satellite locations all over the U.S. and in quite a few other countries worldwide. Going to doctors was a sin, and like Branham, if you weren't healed, you must have unrepented sins or not enough faith. Over 100 people died of preventable illnesses and injuries just in his own church near Warsaw, Indiana alone. But if you add up all the preventable deaths from all locations worldwide, you would have a body count higher than Jonestown. He was about to go to trial for deaths in his church when he died of advanced diabetes complications. Did the prophet have unrepented sins or not enough faith? No. It was spun that Freeman had done all he could do for the faithful on earth and God needed a servant home. I could go on and on. Why? Because I was raised in a satellite location in Florida. They forced my parents to divorce because my parents had both been married previously and God didn't recognize second marriages. I was once bitten in my armpit by a brown recluse spider and it got badly infected, turned gangrenous. Still, I was not taken to the doctor. I'm lucky to have my arm today. Hell, I could have easily died from that. Took months to clear up. To this day, my left armpit is disfigured, heavily scarred. This happened when I was 10. I'm 51 now. So when you mention another Branhamite cult, you had my full attention. There's a guy named John Collins, who is the grandson of the pastor who took over after Branham died. He runs the William Branham Historical Research website. It's william-branham.org. And he deeply dissects the cult and has a podcast on platforms and on YouTube. He has, over the past few months, started a series on Hobart Freeman. In closing, I don't expect you to read this part on the show, but I'd appreciate it if you did, LOL. I have my own podcast that's been going on for over 2.5 years called Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. Very early on in the show, I released 2 1.5+ hour long episodes about Faith Assembly. Episode 10 is about the cult itself. Episode 11 is my own experience in it. Because of my episodes and what John Collins is doing, this cult is being exposed. My 2 episodes are on the top 5 of my most listened to, and John Collins has a much bigger audience than me. He's also interviewed survivors of Faith Assembly, including me, and I've talked about my experience on 2 other podcasts as well, including, ironically, Human Monsters. That's hilarious. Thanks for this episode. It's a crazy story. I enjoy hearing about it, especially because my life is indirectly linked to this because of Branham. Also, I have an episode request. Need your take on Michael Malloy. I think the whole world needs your take on that insane story. 3 out of 5 stars, wouldn't change a thing. Thanks again, Bill. Well, Bill, holy shit, man. They made your parents divorce because they'd been divorced before, and therefore the new marriage not valid. That's, wow. And you couldn't go to the hospital after a brown recluse bit you when you were 10 and the wound became highly infected. What crazy thoughts about the world you must have had growing up. Good for you, trying to expose some of this nonsense by talking on podcasts, starting your own podcast, Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. I actually used John Collins' historical website in my research. So helpful to have some of Branham's dirty deeds listed there. So keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, the Michael Malloy story is fucking nuts. Might be a great short suck. And now one more. From the sweetest, strongest sack, Amanda Baker, who sent in a really kick-ass message, a really hopeful message with a subject line of 10 years sober. She writes, "Hello, Dan, Queen of Bad Magic, and everyone else at Bad Magic. I've been listening to the podcast for years and years now. One of my favorite things is the updates, because it's always uplifting. I've been sober 10 years as of December 1st. My drug of choice was Xanax. Today's my daughter's 11th birthday, and looking back every year is bittersweet. I was in a rehab facility in a different state for my daughter's first birthday, and it was definitely the lowest part of my life. I haven't missed a single birthday since. I've been diagnosed with depression, bipolar, and anxiety disorder. I've attempted suicide and felt worthless for most of my life. If you read this on air, I know there is someone out there now struggling with their own demons. The best advice I ever got was from a very good friend who simply said, it does get better. If you read this on air, I want anyone out there struggling to know it does get better. I'm so much happier now that I'm on the proper medication. Life isn't ever perfect, but it's the only one we get. Getting help is not a weakness. It's the strongest and bravest thing you can do. Thank you, Timesuck, for bringing joy to so many people out there and bringing joy to me as well. Hearing everyone's uplifting updates has helped me get through it some days. 3 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't change a thing. Amanda. P.S. If anyone ever needs someone to talk to when they feel like no one is there for them, I'm here. And you can share my email address with them." Man, Amanda. Brandon talked about angels. You might actually be one. You fucked my allergies up with your message when I first read it. And it's not even allergy season. A lot of pollen in your words. Seriously, congrats on 10 years. That is an incredible accomplishment. And you know what? Missing the first birthday might have been the best thing that ever happened to you regarding being a mother. Now you know what a gift it is to be able to be there for your kids. I bet you have relished the last 10 birthdays far more than most parents do. What a beautiful soul you are. Yes, we will share your email with those who ask for it. Write to bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com if you need to be put in touch with Amanda. If you're going through it, just might save your life. And like she said, it's the only life you get. I love you, motherfuckers. Thanks for being an incredible group of humans. My natural temperament, is possibly permanently set to lean towards Grinch. But you all keep me from evolving into a completely negative, cranky old fuck. So thank you. And it's time to get out of here for this week.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Scared to Death and Timesuck each week. Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel on the Timesuck and Scared to Death podcast feeds some weeks. Don't freak out this week. If someone doesn't want to fuck you, get over yourself. No one is everyone's type, except maybe Brad Pitt. You're probably not Brad Pitt. And even if you are Brad Pitt, well, you don't have to worry about not handling rejection because no one will reject you. So you know what? I guess, Brad, just enjoy yourself as you get to watch your lovers who just keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
You know, this week I was going to end with this haunting little jingle.
My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, my buddy.
Ugh.
Wherever I go, he goes.
No wonder it inspired the Child's Play horror franchise.
My buddy and me.
I hated that as a kid and I hate it now. Now you probably hate it too. But I don't want to end on that. I had so much fun. I know I played it last week, but I didn't play it with the techno beat behind it. And it just makes me smile to play both of these at the same time. To play Pastor Ulf Ekman. What a name, by the way. Swedish guy. Fucking going nuts with his speaking in tongues. And then just throw a little beat behind it.
Are you ready when the
Yo, let's go, buddy! Let's party!
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
Oh, yeah. Yeah! So much noise! Yeah! Come on! Fucking crawl around on the ground!